OTB AM.
With Gillette, proud supporters of Movember. Gentlemen, let's move.
7:30 on this Tuesday morning. You're welcome along to OTB AM. Eoin and Sheahan with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And we've got plenty for you. We've got Champions League, we've got Formula 1, we've got a bit on the November Rugby internationals coming your way between now and then. And the big story, of course, over the last 24 hours will obviously be the main talking point throughout the morning, as Tottenham have acted swiftly and it looks like Antonio Conte is going to be their new manager. We'd love to hear your views on this. You can drop us a tweet at Off The Ball or comment on the YouTube stream if that's where you're watching us this morning. Should Spurs fans be buzzing? Should Manchester United fans be disappointed with this development? Or are they entirely separate things? Is a good Tottenham Hotspur manager not necessarily a good Manchester United manager? As I say, get in touch and we'll get your comments throughout the morning. Sheahan, Hannon, how are you getting on?
Very good morning, Eoin. How are things?
How do you feel about all this?
I feel like Antonio Conte is possibly a missed opportunity for Manchester United, and I think the board know that. But having said that, it's a strange one because they just absolutely love this man at the helm, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They don't seem like any deterrent to keep him at the helm. He's a man who's lived on borrowed time for some time. But having said that, if he beats Atalanta tonight, if he beats Man City at the weekend, he heads into an international break with the world his oyster once again. It's a strange one, but I do think Antonio Conte would have fitted into Old Trafford significantly better than he would have fitted into Tottenham Hotspur. But time will tell. If he's given the money by Daniel Levy, it could be a decent appointment. But yeah, opportunity potentially missed, big style by Manchester United. The
suggestion had been that Conte wanted a pre-season. He wanted 6 weeks with a squad before taking any job, but he was willing to make an exception for Manchester United. As it turns out, he was just willing to make an exception for any top Premier League club, given that the money in Europe and the power as a result in Europe still rests in the Premier League. But this would suggest to me that United didn't really make any move for Conte last week when it looked like he was on, when it looked like Solskjaer was on his last legs after the Liverpool defeat. So I don't know. I think you're probably onto something there, that they really are attached to Solskjaer on some level. Maybe a few bad results over the next couple of weeks will change that, but it seems to me that the Liverpool result didn't push the Manchester United board into taking some sort of recovery action should they have lost a game against Tottenham, for example.
Yeah, like I was at that Liverpool game and like once the score went 4-0 before half time, I was thinking to myself, okay, he's going to be sacked this evening. This isn't going to last beyond tonight. But now that it's reached this point, and in the next game, very next game, they beat Spurs away. Look, Spurs were brutal, but I'm now convinced, rightly or wrongly, that Solskjaer is going to be the man in charge at United until the very end of this season. Like, barring another result akin to the Liverpool one, I honestly think, and I think United fans need to, if you're a hashtag Ollie out United fan at this point, you almost need to just accept the fact. If you could be happy or sad to accept this fact, but I think he's going to be in charge towards the end of this season. It's seen as a project, and it's seen as something more importantly that the players and more importantly the key leadership players have got behind. Like, the word was that some of the key leaders on Monday morning after that Liverpool game texted Solskjaer their support. Now, you look at that United team and you think of the likes of Ronaldo, Bruno Fernandes, Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, David De Gea. These are the leaders in the team. We don't know who sent those texts, but a lot of reporters with close sources inside Old Trafford seem to suggest that. So if he has the support of the players and he has the support of the board, then it doesn't really matter what fans think. And the Ollie Out Brigade on Twitter, of which there are absolutely plenty, and you can't blame them given recent results, I think they're not going to be listened to. And I think, honestly, that support for Solskjaer inside Old Trafford is unwavering. I genuinely think he's going to be there towards the end of the season. He's done a lot of good things at Old Trafford. He's certainly bred a bit of youth. He's made some good signings as well. You can't say his transfer dealings haven't been decent. Popular as well with United fans, of course, for nostalgic reasons. The results haven't been good enough. But look, if they can somehow resurrect this season, win tonight, all but secure Champions League knockout stage progression, potentially beat City at the weekend, and look, if they beat them, they draw level on points with Man City. Let's just put that into perspective. Then who knows where this season can go? And I feel strange saying that, because after the Liverpool game, it was just, the club was in disarray a little bit. It was dire straits, especially after the Leicester result the previous week. But I don't know. I think the United board are sticking with him, and they don't even care that Conte's going to Spurs. They didn't have an eye on the man whatsoever. Now you look at the odds and you're thinking, right, Pochettino and Zinedine Zidane seem to be the top favourites. Brendan Rodgers maybe just off them, but I can't see either of them coming in this side of Christmas anyway. So it's mad stuff.
It does seem, yeah. It's like, I think what you said there at the end is quite accurate, because it did seem that it would have been a hot take to suggest that last week. But I think you're right now. I think Conte maybe was the one outstanding manager that Manchester United would have got that would have made sense, an instant upgrade. As it seemed in the Premier League context. Of course, there are probably managers out there who would do a better job than Solskjaer, who are unproven in the Premier League, and there have been plenty of those names floated around. But it seemed Conte kind of stood alone. Like, I didn't really buy the Zidane stuff, to be honest with you. I don't think he was ever interested in the Manchester United job, and may never be interested in it. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have someone like Ten Hag, who again maybe is very satisfied in his own job, right in the middle of a campaign. They've got a massive game this midweek against Dortmund. Why would he necessarily leave that gig immediately? Or why would Manchester United want somebody who's unproven in the Premier League? So I could see a black mark against every single contender for that Manchester United job, or supposed contender, with the exception of Antonio Conte. Now, then there was plenty of talk from within the camp, or speculation from within the camp, that Conte to Manchester United just would not work. And I can see why that would be the case. I can see why the hierarchy wouldn't want to cede a level of control to a manager who will eventually want that level of control. But I thought that maybe the results had got to a point where they need something short term, and they need to cede something to a manager and try and get some sort of short termism going on in that club. But as you say, if Solskjaer has a good 5 days, 4 days, whatever it is, then all of a sudden the whole picture on the season changes, because they win tonight and they're amazing. They're in an amazing position in their group. Even a draw tonight, just not getting beaten in Italy tonight, would leave them in a very good position in that Champions League group. Get a result against Manchester City going into the international break, and you're like, okay, this thing could be back on track. But that is the theme of the entire Solskjaer era, where you just know that there will be, and we touched on this yesterday, those games maybe against Palace and Brighton in December, like one of those games will be a banana skin for this team, and all of a sudden it'll be back to sort of crisis mode once again. But maybe, Shane, crisis mode is just something that Manchester United slip into more readily, because they are Manchester United and they are the most talked about club in the world, and every negative aspect of them is amplified. But you still get beaten 5-0 at home by Liverpool, and you would have thought that is surely the end for a manager. But the would-be replacement, in my view anyway, has gone off the market, and anybody else that they get in at this point would be something of a risk.
Oh, completely. A massive risk. And they're maybe almost better holding on to Solskjaer at this point and keeping that continuity. We know he has a good coaching team behind him as well, and some people might doubt that, but I think the vibe from the players is that they do enjoy working with Kieran McKenna, Michael Carrick, Darren Fletcher, Mike Phelan. There are good noises from within the camp. Obviously, the media tend to kind of push the other agenda, and once there's a little bit of doubt and uncertainty, they kind of try and find reasons why that might be the case. Like, I was reading Malachy Clerkin's piece in the Irish Times, I think it was yesterday. Like, he was talking about the fact that, look, regardless of what happens in the next few weeks, Solskjaer is going to remain the most popular of the post-Ferguson era managers, even if he is sacked in the next 2-3 weeks, which seems massively unlikely to me at the moment. Like, the thing about Conte is he's now in a massive position of power up against Daniel Levy, because Levy has to back him financially. And that's something he should have done with Maurizio Pochettino. Like, they posted record profits after that Champions League final appearance and just didn't push on from there. They didn't give Pochettino what he needed. Now they absolutely have to give Antonio Conte what he wants. And look, I thought maybe Conte would have suited Old Trafford more than Tottenham. But having said that, I'm such a fan of Antonio Conte as a manager that I can't help but feel that no matter where he goes, he's going to succeed. Like, he had that Juventus Invincibles team in his first year. He won the Premier League with Chelsea in his first year. He did reasonable things with Inter Milan as well. He's just a manager that scares a team into success almost, and maybe that's what Tottenham need. Harry Kane needs a character who is bigger than him at the helm of that club. Nuno Espirito Santo was just not that person. He was never likely to win much. He wasn't the man they wanted in the job in the first place. So how was he ever going to succeed? 4 months was probably even a stretch for Nuno Espirito Santo. But it's just a bizarre situation. Oh, and it's such a bizarre situation, this whole Conte, Pochettino, Solskjaer, Levy mess, that I think watching an episode of Succession last night, kind of made me realise there are similarities.
Yes.
Now, for people, I'm sure you're a big Succession fan as well.
Big fan.
I know most of the world is at the moment, really. And look, I won't give any spoilers. Season 3, episode 3 aired last night.
Excellent episode.
Quite enjoyable episode, it has to be said, up there with one of the best. But I have to say, there are characters in this real world football debacle that remind me of characters from Succession. So I see Antonio Conte as Logan Roy. Eoin, he's brutal, takes no prisoners, knows what he wants. It's all out war. I saw a clip of Conte chatting to Thierry Henry yesterday in an old interview on Sky Sports, and you probably saw the same clip.
Incredible.
Like he's asked, Henry, kind of, for people who didn't see it, asks him, what about players who don't get on board, maybe are acting up in training and that sort of thing, and are they left out of the team then? Are they taken out of the equation? And Conte's reply is just, I would prefer to kill them. Like, his face was stony. He wasn't even joking. He was like, I would prefer to kill them and have 22 players left than deal with the consequences of a player, because you can't lose the dressing room. So that was kind of a Logan Roy answer, I thought.
Yeah, good shout.
A terrifying prospect. I would see Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as cousin Greg. Like, he's meek, a little bit stuttery, but yet capable of big moments when he needs them most. And able to stand up for himself at times, really, really against all odds.
Is he snaky enough?
Well, this is the thing. Like, Solskjaer's a PR man. Solskjaer comes out in post-match interviews when he's lost, and he has the smirk on his face. And looks, that pisses some fans off, but you can't help but almost have that lovable rogue feeling for him. Maybe he's not vicious enough, but I just have that cousin Greg vibe off Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And I love them both. Like, I'm a United fan, I make no bones about it. I love Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Maybe it is for nostalgic reasons, yes, but I also love cousin Greg. And I can't help that. The best character in Succession, in my opinion, by a country mile. I've
got a lot of follow-ups here, Shane, but keep going.
Yeah, a lot of follow-ups. I'm sure you're going to have different opinions, but I would see Nuno Espirito Santo as Conor Roy. Nobody wanted him anyway. There are moments of humour, glimmers of strength. Like, people who maybe have seen the show, Conor Roy decides at some point or other to maybe go for president. It's not a big plot point, but Nuno had the same lofty hopes when he went for the Spurs job, and look, it just didn't work out. He didn't have the support that he needed. So I would see Nuno Espirito Santo as Conor Roy. I would see Daniel Levy as Tom. So Tom Wamsgans, who's the husband of Shiv in the show, like, fancies himself as a shrewd operator, Levy, but he's starting to be shown up a little bit now, and he's throwing one last roll of the dice. So it's kind of a Tom move, and we don't see much of him, but we see plenty of Tom in the show. But Daniel Levy is the same kind of, really fancies himself as a businessman and someone who's very successful, but the cracks are starting to show now, and I think he's showing one last roll of the dice. I would see Maurizio Pochettino, although he's not directly involved in this whole thing, as Kendall Roy. Dark horse, went off to PSG to do his own thing. His image is very important to him. He's managing some superstars at PSG now, and we don't know how that's going to work out. Time will only tell, but so at some point or other, maybe he will come back into the mix and potentially be back managing in the Premier League with who knows, Manchester United. He's the joint favourite to manage at Manchester United at the moment. So I would see Kendall Roy as Pochettino, and finally, Eoin, I would see Harry Kane as Roman Roy. So gone a bit off the rails. He has his big moments as well. Quirky performances quite recently. Downs tools when he feels like it, and yet he has ambition, wants to win ultimately. But quite recently, just hasn't been good enough, hasn't been there. So those are the comparisons I would see. And look, Succession is, in my opinion, the best show I've watched since Breaking Bad, probably, which is a lot because I'm a massive Breaking Bad fan. But those are the comparisons I think. And you probably have different opinions.
I mean, it's an exceptional list, Shane. It's only when you start to dive into the relationships between the characters that maybe there's a few flaws. But I like your Harry Kane Roman comparison. The writer is just completely neglecting to give us anything of late. I mean, where is Harry Kane of late? He has been completely ineffective. It's the same thing can go with Roman. I can take your one-liners here and there, but completely ineffective. Lame duck so far in season 3, which can definitely be said of the 2021-2022 season. The one thing I'd pull you up on is the Tom and Greg dynamic. So you've gone for Daniel Levy and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer here. I would almost go, I would replace Daniel Levy as Tom, and put Gary Neville into his place with Solskjaer almost as his puppet in the dressing room there. That's what I'd like to see. Also, referring to Harry Kane as Roman is probably borderline libelous at this point. I mean, if you superimpose Harry Kane's face onto some of the behaviour of Roman Roy, you'd probably have quite a dark video that could be posted on social media. But that's a good list. I like that. Has Shane got it spot on, guys? You can tweet us at Off the Ball and go through the rest of the characters, all the ancillary characters. We'd love to hear who they are in this sort of I guess psychodrama that is happening at Manchester United and at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Mark has been in touch, very quick off the mark this morning. He says Conte making an exception for any top Premier League club or Tottenham. Drum roll, please, for that. That is like one of the more fascinating things on this whole storyline, Shane, is Conte's U-turn, essentially. Like, as we said, that there was maybe an exception to be made for Manchester United mid-season, but we know that Conte was not having Tottenham Hotspur during the summer. Of course, there has been the change there with Paratici coming in, and there is a relationship there. But one of his central tenets, apparently, was having certainty over his squad. And I would say that there is still a huge degree of uncertainty regarding this Tottenham Hotspur squad. For example, are you still going to have Roman Roy available at the end of the season, even beyond January? If you get a tune out of him, does that mean that Manchester City necessarily swoop on in again and try and make another move for Harry Kane and thereby increase the uncertainty around the squad?
If anyone can hold on to Harry Kane, it's a manager like Antonio Conte. Like, he wants to be managed by big names. I'm sure he probably enjoyed when Jose Mourinho first was named as the Tottenham manager, but didn't work out that way for Tottenham whatsoever. But he probably wants a big character. And look, like, I was listening to Pat Nevin on Off the Ball last night talking about the fact that, look, he likes Spurs as a club. He likes their ambition, even though they don't reach those lofty heights that they want to reach. But the fans have expectation. And Conte, in Pat Nevin's opinion, is not the type of manager that Spurs need right now, which I find interesting. I'm not so sure. Like, he does breed success, changes team and formation when he needs to. Like, I remember him putting Victor Moses as a wing back when he won that league with Chelsea the first year he was with them. The fourth ex-Chelsea manager, by the way, to manage Spurs in the Premier League era, after Hoddle, Villas-Boas and Mourinho, none of them have gone to plan. So if that's anything to go by, it's a dangerous move for Conte. But he's in this position of power. He's got the chance now where he has to invest in this team and will invest in this team because he'll want to put his stamp on it. You mentioned it there. This Spurs team aren't good enough. They were abysmal against Man United. In every single way possible, they were abysmal. And United fans have to take a 3-0 win with a pinch of salt, regardless of the fact that they played very well. Like, a lot of these Spurs players just aren't up to it. They're not up to scratch. And look, Nuno Espirito Santo is a decent guy. He's a decent manager, but he was never going to take Spurs to where they needed to be. It was kind of a poison chalice of a job when he took over. Like, I was reading Barney Ronay in the Guardian, I think it was last night, and he was like, I have it in front of me. The way he described him, he says Nuno was never likely to win much, but he was never going to come close to this model. He is a naturally conservative coach with a look in the touchline of a kindly hill farmer concerned by the travails of his favourite sickly heifer at the hands of the local vet, which I thought was great. Like, when you think of Antonio Conte on the sideline, you think dominance, you think personality, and you think someone who has got complete control. It might take him a transfer window or two to stamp his authority on the team because they're that bad and that far behind. But once he does that, I'd worry. I think the other teams around the top, certainly top four, isn't going to be all that Antonio Conte is aiming for. He's going to be aiming higher for a team that got to a Champions League final just a few seasons ago. So it's a huge acquisition for Tottenham. And look, if I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan this morning, and we'll chat to John Duggan a little bit later on, you're going to be massively excited. You've got to be, because he's the best manager out there that was available. And they've almost forced Manchester United to hold on to their own manager until the end of the season because there's not many other alternatives.
It is an extraordinary change from one manager to the next. There are some similarities, but very few. Like, as you say there, a man who's been described as a sheep farmer, or Conor Roy, going from that to somebody who says he would like to kill his players in training if they're not showing the correct attitude. Like, you're going from a guy who I think everybody felt sorry for, opposition fans felt sorry for at the weekend, going from that to a manager who will probably be hated by a large swathe of his own players. Forget fans. A large swathe of his own players are going to hate this guy when he comes in. That is a complete culture shift within the dressing room. It shows that this is a level of desperation that Tottenham are going to. I think it's a great move, but it still shows a level of desperation that they've had this massive shift. Now, the one thing I would say, and like we will have Daniel Harris with us later on to kind of dig into this a little bit further, but if this guy does have a great season with Tottenham, and who knows, that could lead to them finishing 4th and Manchester United finishing 5th. That doesn't automatically mean that Conte would have done a great job with Manchester United, but it will probably make a lot of Manchester United fans a little bit rueful about them not at least taking a chance in the guy. I think they're two different clubs, and it might have gone a very different way with Manchester United, even if he does a wonderful job at Spurs over the next little while. So it's going to be very, very interesting, and it's a fascinating prospect. And what was his eternal quote? One normal day of Barclays, that's all I ask, when he asked for. I think we're going to get fewer days of normal Barclays as a result of Conte coming back in. The only thing we're missing is Jose, because the Jose-Conte dynamic was a really good one when they were both in the Premier League together. But again, we'd love to hear your views on that. You can drop us a tweet at Off The Ball, and we'll get to them throughout the morning. Let's tell you what's coming up this morning on OTB AM. So we're going to do a Champions League rundown in just a moment to remind you of where the tables are at, the standings are at, going into round 4 of the group stages of the Champions League. Daniel Harris will be with us after 8 o'clock to look ahead to Atalanta, but mainly talk about the managerial developments over the last 24 hours. The sports page is coming your way at 8:30, and then later on in the 8th hour we've got the sports news with John Duggan, a celebratory John Duggan, not just because of Antonio Conte, but also because his virtual insanity headline tip came through last week. Rebecca Clancy of the Sunday Times and the London Times is going to be with us after 9 o'clock to talk about Formula 1. They're in Mexico this weekend after a wildly successful week in the States, I would say, last time out. And then Monday Night Rugby coming your way at 9:30. OTB AM is with Gillette, proud sponsors of Movember. Gentlemen, let's mow. Just quickly on that Formula 1 story, Shane, obviously you've had your own a little bit of disappointment with Formula 1 this season, but by and large it's been a massively satisfying season, I suspect, for anybody who's been banging the drum on this for years, saying watch this thing, watch these kids, there's a new generation coming through, and Lewis Hamilton is not going to be dominant forever. It isn't just down to Netflix. This has been an objectively excellent season.
Oh, completely. Like my disappointment, for those who aren't aware, is that my first and only Formula 1 race to date being the one in Belgium in Spa this year, which was postponed after lots of expense spared on flights. But look, these things happen. I'll be back next year. But no, it's been an incredible season, objectively, and there have been some massive races. Like I think back to Monza when Hamilton and Verstappen clashed. And realistically, the Halo device probably once again saved a Formula 1 driver's life. Quite a slow speed accident in the scheme of things, but that wheel of Max Verstappen's car was just over the helmet of Lewis Hamilton, and look, only for the Halo device would have probably crushed his head. And look, it saved Romain Grosjean in that fiery crash last year in Bahrain. So another indication of the importance of safety in Formula 1. But it's been such an incredible run-in. 5 races left. We've got Mexico this weekend. It all ends in Abu Dhabi on December 12th. So one of the reasons is, yes, absolutely, best title contention we've seen in a long time. And like Toto Wolff's comments quite in the last couple of days really caught my interest. And he made a very good point that if it comes down to the last race, and even the last couple of corners in the last race between Hamilton and Verstappen, it's going to get very, very spicy indeed. We've seen incidents over the years, Prost and Senna, Schumacher and Villeneuve, where one has whoever's in the lead in that final day essentially tries to take out the other driver and win the championship, not by default, but in their own little sabotaging kind of way. So if that happens, please, folks, do not turn off the Formula 1 whatsoever. The other point, and you made it, look, before we were chatting before the show, is the timings. Like in Mexico this weekend, you've got qualifying on Saturday. I think it starts at 7 p.m. Irish time. And then the race on Sunday itself, 8 p.m. Irish time, peak time, like for an Irish audience. So if you want to turn on your TV and watch this weekend, and Mexico is always a decent race as well, the timings could not be better. You're not going to miss this race. It's not like an afternoon race where some people might be busy, they might be playing their own matches or off watching the GA, whatever else, the club championships. This weekend, there's no excuse. Get home, watch the qualifying on Saturday night, and certainly watch the race on Sunday. Like the fact that the tracks maybe favour Red Bull as well makes it interesting, I think, because some people point to Hamilton's experience as being key heading into the last few races. Daniel Ricciardo, interestingly, who was a teammate of Max Verstappen's for a few years at Red Bull, was asked about it recently, and he said Lewis Hamilton's experience means nothing now because Max Verstappen is a different animal than he used to be. He's more mature, he's calmer, although he's still capable of his fiery moments on track, no doubt. But the fact that some of these tracks coming up, and particularly the next 2 tracks in Mexico and Brazil, have historically favoured Red Bull, makes it quite interesting, because then if Red Bull win those 2 races, Max is in a strong position, but it's still delicately poised heading into the last 3 races because Hamilton just doesn't go away, and there's absolutely no chance he's going to go away over the next 5 races. Like Toto Wolff kind of said, I don't think there's a pattern of which tracks suit which teams, but his own driver Lewis Hamilton came straight away out and said, no, the next 2 tracks are for sure strong Red Bull tracks, so it's going to be tough. You've got the radio as well for people who tune in on television on Saturday and Sunday and who have tuned in across the last number of, and you'll know this from watching Drive to Survive as well. The radios between the engineers and the drivers are gas crack. I mean, you get some real solid moments of comedy sometimes as well, because like even in practice at Austin in the American Grand Prix last time out, like Hamilton and Verstappen had a lovely side-by-side moment in practice. Practice is usually this nice, calm affair, but things are heating up, and they were side-by-side for a portion of that race around a few corners. And Verstappen over the radio just says, "Stupid idiot," about Lewis Hamilton. And it's going to get more spicy than that. They don't really get on, like they don't talk off track. Hamilton says, "We have limited communication, not really a huge amount to say," which is fair enough. They don't have to be friends. The constructors' battle, I think, as well, Eoin, is another reason why people should tune in. Like, we all talk about the fact that it's Hamilton, Verstappen, but a lot of people are interested in the constructors' battle as well and follow their teams. Like Mercedes, Red Bull is very tight. Mercedes actually have a 23-point lead at the top ahead of Red Bull, but it really gets juicy when you look at the best of the rest. McLaren and Ferrari fighting for that 3rd spot. McLaren currently on 254 points, Ferrari just behind them on 250.5. So that's really going to get interesting. Like, you've got the McLaren drivers, Ricciardo and Lando Norris, who have had extraordinary seasons, a couple of very solid results for them. And yet, for Ferrari, they just won't go away. So the constructors' battle between them is really going to spice up. And look, we have the Drive to Survive. We're going to have moments where over the next couple of weeks we see the drivers' lineups for 2022 kind of be finalised. Like Valtteri Bottas is moving from Mercedes to Alfa Romeo. We have yet to see who's going to partner him with Alfa Romeo. George Russell is moving from Williams to Mercedes to partner Lewis Hamilton. Alex Albon is coming back in from the cold to come back into Formula One as a Williams driver. So lots of decent talking points and lots of reasons why people should absolutely not only tune in this weekend, Eoin, but tune into every one of the last 5 races remaining. It's set to be quite a battle right to the finish line.
5 races, 6 weeks, December 12th, it all finishes up. It is going to be a hell of a run-in, if that's what they even call it in Formula 1. Like, the thing is as well is that there's a situation here where the season has been so good, and there seems to be this confusion that the season has been good because of Drive to Survive, which, as I say, is just not the case at all. It's been objectively great. But the thing is, an objectively great season will make the next season of Drive to Survive even better. It'll make it the best season of all time. Now, I know Verstappen isn't cooperating and isn't taking part of this because he's too cool for Drive to Survive at this point. That every driver's and no matter who's involved, the thousands and thousands of people involved with Formula 1 teams, no matter who you are, it's like your stance on Drive to Survive is so important. Like you mentioned that Toto Wolff interview, who's speaking in the Mail this week, and even he kind of gets drawn into the idea that people are just using it as a way of pushing forward a personality that doesn't necessarily exist. You've got Verstappen, as I say, who's kind of pulled out of it a little bit, and everybody has become uber self-aware as a result of this documentary, which I think is telling in itself. People's relationships with this show, or the character that they push forward of themselves, or the lack of character they push forward of themselves in the show, is a really interesting kind of, I guess, subplot to this whole season as well. So it's fascinating stuff, even if you take away the sport itself. But the sport itself, as you say, has been pretty good. Completely.
And like, the interesting thing about Drive to Survive, it's made not only the drivers, but even some of the team principals household names. Like Gunther Steiner, that Haas team principal, who appears quite readily in season 1 and season 2, certainly of Drive to Survive. Like, his own cousins probably wouldn't have recognised him walking down the street before Drive to Survive. And now all of a sudden, all Formula 1 fans know him. Like, Haas are the team at the very bottom of the rung of the ladder when it comes to teams in Formula 1, and that's a large amount down to budget. And the teams with the most money tend to win in Formula 1, which is one of the annoying things about it. But that's life. Money wins you. It's the same in football. It's the same in most sports. Dublin GA as well. Like, but for Haas, I mean, Gunther Steiner's a household name now because of it. And there's also, you sometimes think, oh, these shows maybe could be cursed, and they tend to, the cameras for Drive to Survive tend to follow around one team per race, and they kind of, you notice that in the episodes as well, that certainly for certain races they have more with one team than others. So obviously they can't be everywhere at once. But like they don't get unlucky. They actually get quite lucky. Like at Monza this year, for example, and I can't wait to see the episode next year. They followed McLaren. They just happened to be with McLaren, and it just happened to be the race where McLaren had a 1-2. Daniel Ricciardo wins the race, and Lando Norris finishes second. Daniel Ricciardo does his usual shoey, drinks the champagne out of his boot, and there's just so many great moments in that race for McLaren. And the fact that Drive to Survive just happened to be in that garage for that race says a lot about it. But like even Charles Leclerc, the Ferrari driver, like he's a Formula One driver, well-known name, born and bred in Monaco, and he said, "Look, I was recognised by the avid Formula One fans on the street before Drive to Survive came out, but after it came out, I can barely walk down to the shops. I get recognised absolutely everywhere." And you can understand what he means, because before Drive to Survive came out, if Charles Leclerc or another Ferrari driver like Carlos Sainz or even Valtteri Bottas walked into a local shop in somewhere in Ireland, I mean, they wouldn't have been recognised by many people. Of course, Lewis Hamilton would have been, Max Verstappen would have been, but the other drivers in and around the top tier wouldn't have been recognised. But after Drive to Survive, the obsession with the sport has become quite incredible to watch. And look, it actually rejuvenated my own interest in the sport. It's something I have to say, like I kind of meekly followed years ago, but because of Drive to Survive and my obsession with the show, I really, really got back on board. Like Drive to Survive was the reason I decided to buy a ticket to the Spa Grand Prix. Look, it didn't work out in the end, but that's just an example. And my two mates or three mates that came with me were the exact same. Only for Drive to Survive, there's 4 tickets to a Formula One Grand Prix, and a lot of money spent, in the pursuit of it.
Did you get your money back for that?
No, do you know what happened? So Formula One, a week or two later, actually put up a statement saying that they were trying to finalise a way to make things okay for the fans. And I got the vibe from their statement that they were either going to give money back or offer fans a ticket to a race of their choice, or maybe Spa next year again. And there's been radio silence ever since. And that's a while ago. So, look, I'll try and follow up with them. I'll try and get on to Formula One myself and see what the situation is for all those fans like myself who flew over and were disappointed. But hopefully they make it right in some way.
We'll have Rebecca Clancy of the Sunday Times with us a little bit later on to add some meat to the bones of the conversation that Shane brought up there, and it's going to be a fascinating few weeks. Plenty of reaction, as you can imagine, to the conversation around Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United. Sai has been in touch to say Glazers out, just standard. Jim says this guy backs Kenny, Ole and Koeman. You got a track record, Shane, of being too forgiving, it turns out. Shifty Lad though says, I'm with Shane. No teams now are projects like Manchester United and Arsenal eras. Even Pep almost left City because of being there so long. Think this is an opportunity missed. Conte would win the fans in a week. And then Bido says Shane is trying to claim Ole has bred some youth players. United are a joke shop, biggest circus in the football world. Crying, laughing face.
Some of this is libelous. By the way, Rory Larmour on Twitter as well, a fellow Monaghan man, comparing Shiv in Succession to Brendan Rodgers. So that's another comparison that someone has made. Decent one. I don't recall ever backing Ronald Koeman, so that's libelous right there, straight off the bat. I don't think I've ever spoken about Ronald Koeman in a positive light or defended him from a Barcelona point of view. So that one is completely wrong. But yeah, Stephen Kenny, fair enough. And yes, I have been historically backing of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Wasn't after the Liverpool game, but don't let facts get in the way of a good story. But it is what it is. You kind of have to, like the online, and this is the other thing that really annoyed me, Eoin, is that you see United fans. I spoke to a couple of United fans in the pub at the weekend who actually, before the Spurs game, wanted them to lose. Which is not that's not a supporting, that's an online element as well of football teams that just isn't it's a nasty element. They want them to lose, so Ole Gunnar Solskjaer loses his job, things move on. But you got to support your team, whether you're a Liverpool fan, a United fan, an Arsenal fan, or a Accrington Stanley fan. You've got to support your team through thick and thin, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Right, it is 8:04 on this Tuesday morning. Just to let you know that Liverpool fans won't want to miss our latest Cadbury FC Roadshow. We're going behind the scenes at Anfield with legendary striker Robbie Fowler. We'll also be joined by Liverpool captain and Ireland international Niamh Fahey and former Liverpool midfielder and physio Richie Partridge. It's all with thanks to Cadbury FC and their club partnerships, granting you behind the scenes access at the Premier League's biggest clubs, coming soon to OTB Sports social channels. Right, as I say, it's just coming up to 8:05 this morning. We've got a packed show still to come here on OTB AM. We'll hear from Daniel Harris next.
OTB AM.
On OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
He's a lion, he's a Grand Slam winner, he's Ireland's leading try scorer, and now you can hear him first, exclusively on the OTB Sports app.
One of my abiding memories is having my cut opened up again as I got hit by the trophy in coppers on the dance floor.
Join Brian O'Driscoll for the best insight and analysis this rugby season.
We haven't had the usual kind of grenades from Gats, that's gone, so we're creating them ourselves.
Get the jump on everyone else. Download the OTB Sports app and turn on notifications now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, proud supporters of Movember. Gentlemen, let's move.
Welcome back. We'll be joined by Daniel Harris in just a moment to look ahead to Atalanta against Manchester United. Just going to bring you through some of the back pages. This morning, the Irish Examiner first up. Rebel reboot. Coaching guru Gary Keegan rejoins Cork hurling backroom team in major overhaul by Kingston. Really interesting developments there in the backroom team for Cork. It is only a couple of weeks after Henry Shefflin was the really interesting development in the Galway backroom team, so or leading the entire management team, I should say. So it's going to be a fascinating couple of months in hurling, you suspect, once the season gets underway next year. The back of the London Times then goes with Conte agrees £15 million deal to rescue Spurs. The Irish Daily Mail goes with Conte coup. Italian agrees 18-month Spurs deal and pockets £13 million salary. The Irish Daily Star, meanwhile, go with Conte may in. Spurs turn to Antonio as Nuno sacked. Also, an exclusive here by Paul Lennon. Duff agrees to become Shell's boss. Damien Duff has agreed in principle to become the new Shelburne manager with Joey O'Brien to join him as assistant. That's a really interesting appointment from Shelburne there, or an appointment that's yet to happen, I guess. They approached Duff last week, who worked as an under-17 boss with the club this year, and he's going to take over from Ian Morris, who resigned 8 days ago. Initial talks between Shell's chairman Andrew Doyle and Duff, that also involved the club's director of football Alan Caffrey, were fruitful, they report. But over the weekend, Duff stalled on the potential deal, but apparently it's back on the table, and the 42-year-old is due to take over at Shelburne. So that'll be a very interesting one once it is completed. Right, at 8:07 on this Tuesday morning, it is time to turn our attention back to the football. Daniel Harris, a very good morning to you.
Hello.
From a Manchester United perspective, are you jealous that Spurs got Conte?
No. I mean, that would really be a low if you're, as a United supporter, being jealous of Tottenham, then thing. But no, I mean, I think Conte's really good. I definitely wonder if he's got the gas to get beyond Guardiola and Klopp, because although Conte did an unbelievable job to win the title that season with Chelsea, converting Victor Moses into an acceptable wing-back is not the way that you're going to win this league, I think because he was there when Klopp was rebuilding at Liverpool and in Guardiola's first season. And I think things have changed quite a lot since then. And I don't think that Conte would necessarily be the man to take United beyond them, because I think that he's less good than the two guys that are already at the top.
How are you going to get to a place where you're confident that Manchester United have that guy? Like, even if you take away job availability or who's not looking for a job at the moment, who is potentially that guy for Manchester United?
I don't know. I think that, I mean, if you're saying, if let's say that Solskjaer gets fired or leaves at the end of the season, then I guess I'll probably go for Pochettino, who may or may not be the right person. But what I think you get with him is you get someone who wants to build something, which I think is quite important with this United squad, because there are a lot of excellent young players in it. And Conte's not really that interested in that. And that's one of the reasons I don't think he'd be the best fit. Pochettino would want to build something. I also think the kind of high-energy football that Pochettino wants to play is something that he could actually play with United's forward line. Because if you think about it, let's say he was to come in the summer, then Cavani's not going to be there. Then you've got Ronaldo, who's got 1 year left. But apart from that, you're going to have Mason Greenwood, Jadon Sancho, Anthony Elanga, Marcus Rashford. And those players, if they can be bothered and instructed to, they're able to press from the front, to play aggressively, and have a lot of different abilities that we've merged quite well into a good forward line. But I don't think that Conte would necessarily be so interested in developing those players, because he doesn't stay anywhere for long enough really to do that, although he is really good. And as I said at the beginning, the job that he did in getting Chelsea that league title, without him, they probably don't win that league title. And that was he did an incredible job in that season, and no one would deny that. But not every manager is right for every job, and I'm not certain that Conte would be the right man for this job. And I would personally be prepared to wait till the summer for Pochettino if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer gets fired. And I mean, we were sitting here last week discussing that as an inevitability because that was how it looked. And I'm sure, it's an inevitability at some point, but United were good at the weekend. They didn't have very much to beat, but it may be that he's found a way of mitigating weaknesses and emphasising strengths. Who knows?
We'll come back to that in just a moment. But so is your belief that Pochettino would have the gas to take a club beyond Klopp and Pep, but Conte doesn't have that?
It's not so much that, although it is a little bit of that. It's also that I think that Pochettino would be a better fit for the players that United have.
Fair enough.
I don't think that Conte is like the negative Mourinho he's always said to be. Chelsea played some good stuff under him, mainly on the counter, but still they put some good stuff together. He was someone you thought maybe you'll fall out with. Eden Hazard didn't. So it's not exactly that, but he is a practical manager, and he seems to have particular things he likes and particular things he doesn't like. Even though he doesn't, he for example, like, as I said last week, he wrote his thesis as Miguel Delaney of the Independents. They're playing 4 at the back, but he seems to have played 3 at the back quite a lot. I'm not sure that he... Oh, Christ, my wife's put the printer on. Sorry about that. From downstairs, that is what that noise is. But he's an excellent motivator. The players want to play for him, and that is also something that's important. And he's organised, and with that Chelsea team, he worked out the best way of playing with that team that he had pretty quickly, and then all of a sudden they went on an unbelievable winning run. I mean, you can't not respect that, and you'd have to be an idiot not to respect that. But I think that the improvisational flair United had is not necessarily something that he's that into. I don't know. Like maybe I'm totally wrong. But would I expect Conte to take this United team past City and Liverpool? I don't really think that I would. I think there's a better chance that Pochettino would be able to do that, or be able to build something that might be able to do that in 2 or 3 years' time, which is not an amount of time I would particularly want to wait, or even necessarily an amount of time that I think should be waited for. But it just seems to me that Pochettino's approach of aggressive pressing, but also of inspiring the players in a way that I think might last a little bit longer than what Conte does, is something that would be a better fit.
That's fair enough. And like I said earlier on, that if Conte does a really good job with Tottenham this season, it doesn't necessarily mean that Manchester United missed out on Conte, because it's comparing apples with oranges here. So in the context of Tottenham Hotspur, how successful is this Conte thing going to work out?
I think it's a pretty good appointment. I'd say that Conte is probably the best manager that they could get. I thought Nuno was a bizarre appointment at the time, because if Joe Lewis, Daniel Levy and Enoch aren't going to put the money in that it's going to take to make Tottenham contenders, and we know that they're not, the fact that Pochettino did it was due partly to Pochettino's brilliance, partly due to the fact that he had Harry Kane just at the club, ready to explode. And also, if you look at the teams that Pochettino's Spurs came second to, they came second to Leicester and they came second to Conte's Chelsea. That team was never going to take a title off the teams that came after that. So I think that he is the best manager that Tottenham could have got in terms of how good he is. But the fact that they then went and appointed Nuno was strange, because, as I said, if you're not going to put the money in that's going to enable you to contend for titles, then in order to keep the supporters in any way happy, you've got to get them entertained. And Nuno's teams do not play entertaining football. The way he played with that Wolves squad was a hate crime. They had loads of really lovely, improvisational, creative players. They had Adama Traore, they had Raul Jimenez, they had Podence, they had Neto, although he's injured now. They had Moutinho, Neves, lovely players. And he managed to turn them into something that was unbearably intolerable to watch, because they played so reactively and so slow when they didn't have to. And look, there's no right way to play football. You can play however you want to play, but I just found that watching Wolves was an extremely frustrating experience, because they should have been so much better than they were. Although Nuno had taken them to a good level, if you'd have put a better manager with that squad, or just a more attacking manager who would just let them go, I think you would have seen a much better team. I remember after lockdown, Wolves were still in with a chance of getting the top 4. And I remember, I think they lost a game or drew a game at home to Sheffield United where they were just sitting there. And it was just appalling to watch because it didn't need to be like that. And Bruno Lage is, you watch Wolves now and all of a sudden they look like a different team. I mean, whether they're a better team or not remains to be seen because Nuno had them organised. But in terms of the actual activity of watching them, I'd much rather watch Wolves now than at any time during the last 2 or 3 years.
Daniel, the word reactive comes to mind when I think of Tottenham quite often. Like you think of them reversing the furloughing of staff, you think of them backing down from the Super League when all the negativity came in from fans, and even you look at the match of the weekend, like in particular when I think it was Stephen Bergwijn came on for Lucas Moura and the boos rang around the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and the cameras just panned to Nuno Espirito Santo and you just knew that was the beginning of the end. Daniel Levy's looking on at that, seeing the boos, makes the cutthroat decision. And then you look at Old Trafford and you see the boos ringing around the stadium as the players walked off at half-time against Liverpool. And yet the United board stood still and stood firm and stood by their man, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So which do you look at it as the better move? Like, do you think boards and chairmen should be reactive like Levy? Or do you look more, I guess, willingly towards things like holding on to your manager and standing firm as a bit more noble?
I mean, the situations are different, I guess. I mean, I think that Levy definitely did the right thing because he made the wrong appointment and someone he wanted was available. But I would have happily seen Solskjaer leave the latest after Leicester because that was definitely the point where I felt this isn't. However, this might get better periodically, but it's not going to get better enough. And the thing with United is they always have good enough players to beat any team, which is one of the reasons every time it looks like Ole's really in trouble. The players like him; they like playing for him. Most of them, they find the performance for him because they're good. But it kind of depends if the manager you want is available. I don't think that United absolutely held on to Solskjaer after Liverpool because everyone at the club was convinced that this was just a blip and they were going to get better enough. I don't think that's what happened. I think that if they'd have wanted Conte, they would have fired him. They would have installed Conte. They didn't want Conte. They either don't want Zidane. Zidane doesn't want them. He's also available. Then the other three candidates who I think there seems to be uniform agreement that the names that have been discussed are Brendan Rodgers, Eric Ten Hag, and Mauricio Pochettino, none of them are available. So I think that United would probably want to try and stagger through to the end of the season and finish in the top four. And if they fire Ole, then what? If they can't get any of the names that they want, they've then got to find a caretaker manager. So what do? They appoint Solskjaer again to be the caretaker manager and hope to get into the top four. They have a problem. And I feel for their problem because, I mean, I don't feel for them as individuals because I don't particularly think they deserve that fellow feeling from me. But that if you need to get rid of your manager, but the guy you want isn't available, then what do you do? And I guess they decided to take stock where they felt if United did badly or lost to Tottenham, then lost to Atalanta, then lost to City, they would have to do something because at that point, top four is in a lot of peril. They're still in the Champions League, but with the games that are left, assuming they manage to find a way around young boys, they need a point from either the Atalanta game tonight or from Villarreal away. Those are difficult games, and they would need a change of mood. But in fairness to Ole and in fairness to the players, he changed things a little bit and he got performance out of them. And you could point at the fact that he changed the formation to give the centre-back safety in numbers. I mean, that would be one thing that happened. I also kind of feel that the players should be ashamed of themselves, that was necessary. But he also got Varane back. And I think even more than anything, they just ran a lot harder. They were much more aggressive. They ran harder and they were more sensible in the way that they did their running. And to me, that will always override intensity, and mentality will always override tactics. And although they did look to be comfortable in the formation that they played, I think the main thing was the fact that they ran harder and they played better.
Like something you mentioned there, Daniel, just to pick up on it, like you mentioned the managers who are available. And like I'm just looking at the headlines this morning linking Unai Emery to the Newcastle job and the fact that they're quite willing to pay Villarreal whatever compensation package they need to get Unai Emery into St James's Park. Now, look, they have the Saudi money; they can certainly afford to do that. But should a club like Manchester United, like we as football fans, probably get obsessed with, okay, what top managers are available? Okay, Conte's gone. Who's next on the available list? Like, should a club like Manchester United of their calibre not be just looking at their list of managers and seeking out whoever they can get, whether they are currently available or not?
I don't think it's as simple as that. I mean, extracting Pochettino from Paris Saint-Germain pre-season, in the middle of the season, is probably quite a difficult thing to negotiate and to arrange. What if they don't want him to go? I mean, I don't know what it says in these guys' contracts, so it's very hard to talk specifically about it. Eric Ten Hag is doing really well at Ajax. He might be ready to move to a richer club, but he might also say, well, I want to finish the season here because, look, he's built a team. He might not want to disappear in the middle of the season. I mean, you can rationalise all of these things. Leicester probably have enough money to say no to Brendan Rodgers. I mean, Brendan Rodgers would probably leave if he could, because if he wanted to, he might also not want to, because he did it to Celtic. In order to take the Leicester job, he left Celtic when they were on for the treble because it was a step up for him, and Brendan Rodgers wanted to progress. But that doesn't mean he would necessarily do it, because who knows? I mean, maybe he fancies himself for the Manchester City job. That is also something that I've heard said. Don't know if it's true. It's not something that I'm saying has come from a source, but it's definitely something that is talked about. So there'll always be reasons, because you don't know what people's contract says. You don't know people's family situations. You don't know people's personal situations. So it's not always about simply paying the money to get someone when you want them, because sometimes you have to wait until the end of the season to get someone when you still want them, but not when you wanted them previously. And so I don't know. Let's say the United know that they could get Pochettino in the summer. But they know that they can't get him before the summer. Would you appoint Brendan Rodgers before then to fill in that 6-month gap, even though he wasn't strictly the guy that you wanted? Personally, I wouldn't. But I can understand why someone might think about that. But ultimately, if you're trying to pick a manager who is the best manager that you want and you're sure that he is the right person, then you would wait for them, I think, in the same way that you might wait for a player that you wanted rather than buy a second choice. And the manager is even more important than that, because if you get it wrong, it could set your club back seasons and cost an absolute stack of money.
One of the reasons that has been listed why Conte maybe wasn't interested in Tottenham over the summer was just an element of uncertainty around some of the positions. And I think James Horncastle's been reporting that in the interim, the signing of the likes of Emerson Royal and Christian Romero answered a couple of those questions. But really, Daniel, the biggest level of uncertainty around that Tottenham squad is with Harry Kane. How do you see this playing out? Because if Conte gets a tune out of Harry Kane, is he just not a more attractive prospect for Manchester City once again next summer?
It's hard to know, because you don't know whether with Harry Kane is physically we've seen the best of him. He'll always be a good player, but you can see the way that he's playing now is that it feels like he doesn't trust himself as much to get away from defenders. So instead of moving away from the ball to get into position, he's coming towards the ball so he can try and get on it under pressure. That might be because he's still recovering, he's not properly fit, or it might be because he didn't get a proper break in the summer and the Euros took their toll, or it might be that just he's had one injury too many. And it's also hard to know, because of the way that Nuno was playing is probably not a way that suited Harry Kane, because Wolves are so slow apart from when they're countering. And the thing with Harry Kane is, what's brilliant about Harry Kane, apart from just the overall fact that Harry Kane's a brilliant player, when I watch him, is that how early he shoots. And that's one of the reasons he's so deadly from kind of that 15 to 22 yard range. I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone better. But in order to do that, you have to get the ball to him early, because he shoots early. And I think that under Nuno, Tottenham weren't really doing that. So perhaps that was also encouraging him to come deeper. But he's not been getting great service. He's not been playing in a team that is confident. He's playing in a team that probably isn't that confident in the manager. So it may be that Harry Kane is now past his best. And I mean, we saw it with Alan Shearer, where after the second cruise ship, he was still an excellent player, but he wasn't as good as he was. And he was still good for years and years after that. So perhaps he's also learning how to change his game, because physically he can't do the things that he used to. But as you say, the way that he's able to perform under Conte will tell us a lot about that, because Conte will probably have a better idea of how to build a team that suits him.
Daniel, just looking at the United formation and trying to think ahead of the formation they're going to play tonight against Atalanta. And we know Victor Lindelof is out after picking up a knock in training. That probably means if he sticks with the 3 at the back or the 5 at the back, whatever way you look at it, either Eric Bailly comes in or Luke Shaw comes into the left-hand side of the 3 with Tellez as a wing-back. But when you think of the larger scheme of things and you think of that formation and the formations that Solskjaer tends to put out, you look at people like Donny van de Beek and Jadon Sancho, and look, Gary Neville referenced it at the weekend, and try to, I guess, ruminate and think about how these two guys who cost so much money are going to fit into this team. Like, I saw the photographs of the players getting onto the plane to Bergamo yesterday from Manchester, and Donny van de Beek, the only guy without a smile on his face. I watched him cool down after the Liverpool game by himself for 10 minutes on the Old Trafford pitch with a coach. Just such a dejected looking figure. £35 million. Like, it feels like Groundhog Day to ask you about Donny van de Beek's situation, but really, when you look on now, you have to wonder who made this call of signing Donny van de Beek.
It does happen sometimes where a club signs a player and it turns out not to be what they want. It happened, but Mourinho didn't play Mkhitaryan for months and months, although he did end up scoring in the Europa League final. But for whatever reason, he wasn't United's first choice. They got him, I guess, because he was cheap. And for whatever reason, Ole doesn't rate him. And for me, when I've watched him play, I can see why he's not getting in the team. I think he's not a bad player. He's kind of tidy, but he allows the game to pass him by and doesn't get involved enough. And that's been the thing for me. And the problem is that Bruno plays in his best position, and Bruno is United's best player. And United haven't developed to a point where they feel comfortable rotating out Bruno. In terms of the formation that United are now playing, if they are going to now be a 3-4-1-2 team, then they need to play it in all the games, I think. Because if you look at what Chelsea did, Tuchel came in, he made a decision that was how he wanted Chelsea to play, and they play like that in every game. If they're playing a crap team at home, they still play the same way. They still play that formation because ultimately the best teams play the same way almost every game. They'll have a few other formations up their sleeves that they can call upon if they need them, but more or less, Liverpool play 4-3-3 basically every game. They might change it. They changed it a little bit to 4-4-2 last season when things weren't going well for them. City play 4-3-3. Chelsea play 3-4-1-2. And they play it in every game because that's how you create the relationships and the automatisms that enable you to play fast football. And I think it's quite interesting, this 3-4-1-2, because in a way, playing that way with United is a hate crime because it means that you're going to have so many good players on the bench every time. But if it gives you your defensive solidity, then you would bargain on the three attackers being able to play the right way, to find a goal, to find a moment in every game where they'll score at least once. You also have all those other players that you can bring on, and you've also what the advantages that it gives you is that the midfield players in front of the back four, they can properly go forward. So Scott McTominay and Fred have sort of been bundled up in the number 6 role because United don't have anyone to play that. Now, those guys are not that. Like, they're athletes. They're runners rather than sitters and passers. But the way that you saw Scott McTominay play, particularly against Tottenham, where he's running past men, he's carrying the ball forward, one of the reasons he's able to do that is because he's got 3 centre-backs behind him, and he's also got 2 wing-backs who are defenders. So in the first instance, he knows that he's got security and he's able to do that. He's able to extract the most from his talent because that's what Scott McTominay is. He's a ball carrier, he's a ball winner, and he's someone who can run into the box past the forward players. That's what he is. And he's not been able to do that. And when he is able to do that, you're going to see better performances from him, and that's going to make the team better. I think the other thing that is quite useful with that formation is that because you've got 3 centre-backs who are all good on the ball, they can all carry the ball, they can all pass the ball, number 6 is less keenly felt because you've got 3 defenders that can all basically perform that task. They're all good enough on the ball with a good enough range of passing to be able to build the play. And that, in turn, pushes the midfield players further forward where you want them to be. And it means that you're eradicating one of the weaknesses in that team was the lack of a player able to control the game, able to build attacks. You've got 3 players that are able to do that. And the other thing that I couldn't help but notice is that I don't think that Chelsea's highest level is the highest level of all the teams in the Premier League. I don't think it's really even that close to it. But the way the Premier League is now, if you look at all the teams, almost all the teams in the league, apart from perhaps the bottom 3, the bottom 4 or 5, have a player, if not several players, that are able to hurt you. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the team who are top of the league are not the team with the highest top level, but the team who are most solid. And I think that's Chelsea, that they don't always score that many goals. I mean, they're improving in that aspect, but the front players aren't really scoring. But they're very, very difficult to break down. And with the players that they have, Havertz, Mount, whoever it is, Lukaku, Werner, Ziyech, they will find a goal or two in every game, pretty much. And if they're not conceding many, then that will often be enough to win them games. And as I said, because you're finding that Liverpool are getting caught at home by Brighton, for example, and I watched that game, and Brighton should have won. Liverpool were not as good as Brighton on that day. And that's because if you look at the players that Brighton have, they've got lots and lots of players who can hurt you, and they play an attacking style of football that can find the weaknesses in your defence. And if your defence doesn't have many weaknesses, if you're able to neutralise a team like Brighton, then you can rely on your players with star quality to make a difference. And that's one of the reasons. I mean, I don't like three at the back in general. I don't like the fact that United had played it in the last game. I think the players should be ashamed of themselves that was where they had to go. But I can see that in the future, that might be a sensible way of deploying United's resources to make the best team out of them, because it makes them very hard to break down, but you still back them to score a goal or two in every game. And so I think that the way that United usually play is actually not bad for Atalanta, because Atalanta leave a lot of space in behind, as we saw in the first game. And whatever formation United play tonight, I would definitely be playing at least Marcus Rashford as one of the strikers, because I think that Atalanta leave gaps that United will want his pace to attack. But I think they'll probably will play the three at the back against City and then at the weekend. And then they do need to make a decision. And if they are deciding that at the moment that's the best way, then they need to commit to that style and play it in every game.
Yeah, and just to finish up then very quickly on that City game, because it's such a huge game this Saturday afternoon. What you said about Brighton against Liverpool there, you could say the exact same thing about Crystal Palace, that they were full value for that win on Saturday afternoon. Does that speak to a real level of vulnerability that you're seeing in this Manchester City team this season?
I don't think it's the level of vulnerability exactly. I mean, it's that other teams are good. Other teams have got good players who can get at you, and if that happens, then you're going to have a problem. And that was what we saw with City. I don't think City are particularly great at the back. I don't think Pep Guardiola has ever had a team that is great at the back. He's had great teams that have great defensive records because they don't have to defend that much. But I don't think he's got great defenders, and I don't think City are great at the back. So if you can get enough of the ball, and if you're brave, then you can absolutely get at City. And we've seen it from United over the last couple of seasons. So I wouldn't say that they're vulnerable. I mean, I think that they're probably the best team in the league, or at least their top level is the highest of all the teams in the league. But they have to bring that level more often to win games now, because teams understand how to play against Pep Guardiola teams, and they have good enough players to exploit the weaknesses in them. And I think that if United turn up against City and they defend properly, then City know that they'll be in for a difficult game, because with the attackers United have, they're able to create chances against anyone.
Daniel Harris, thanks a million.
See you again. Have a good day, everyone.
Cheers. Atalanta against Manchester United, one of the standout games over the next couple of nights in the Champions League. Just to run you through some of the permutation / games you should be keeping an eye on over the next couple of nights in the Champions League. We are starting with Group E, F, G and H tonight, the first night of the Champions League's return. Group E, you've got Bayern against Benfica tonight. Bayern qualify with a win in that game. This has obviously been a fascinating group E, because it is of course the group with Barcelona in it as well. They stumbled past Dinamo Kiev at home a couple of weeks ago. They're fulfilling the away fixture of that obviously tonight. If Benfica get a result and Barcelona can't win that game tonight, they are officially in big trouble. We've obviously catastrophised quite a bit about Barcelona on this show over the last little while. I'm not quite sure it's there right now, because if Barcelona get a positive result tonight, if they win in Kiev, and if Bayern beat Benfica as they're expected to do, then things are okay, because the return leg against Benfica, yes, they embarrassed them in the first leg, is in Barcelona. That game is on in the new camp, and Barcelona just a point behind Benfica. So I think this idea that Barcelona, yes, they're in trouble in the league, massive trouble in the league, but that they're also in immediate danger in the Champions League, I'm not sure we're at that level just yet. But still, Dinamo Kiev versus Barcelona tonight, very much a scoreline to keep an eye on. Group F then, we've already been touching on it. It's Atalanta versus Manchester United, the standout fixture in that one. United will be in really good shape if they win this. We mentioned this at the top of the show, that, you know, Solskjaer has experienced boom bust throughout his entire reign as Manchester United manager. This would be no different, because if they get all 3 points tonight, I think it'll be very hard for them to not qualify. Even a draw will put them in a really good position for the last couple of rounds A draw would keep them 2 points ahead of Atalanta, but the next game is away to Villarreal. So this is essentially Manchester United's toughest 2 fixtures back to back. Villarreal versus Young Boys, obviously the other fixture in that. Young Boys haven't won. They've lost both of their games since beating Manchester United on the opening day. Villarreal currently level on points with Atalanta. And just a little bit of a preview, Villarreal versus Atalanta is the final game of this group. That could literally be a shootout for who qualifies. Group G then, one of our hipster groups that we mentioned from the outset, Wolfsburg versus Salzburg is on 5:45 if you're at your TV early this evening. If it's a home win there, let's face it, we're all hoping for a home win there because it'll make this group very tasty indeed. It'll totally open up the things that this group if Salzburg get beaten, but by the same token if Salzburg win in Wolfsburg tonight, they will be home and hosed. Sevilla versus Lille is the other group game. There, a winner would catapult themselves into qualification in that one. And then Group H, Chelsea are also playing tonight. That's also 5:45. Chelsea 3 points off Juve, would only be 1 point away from qualification if they win tonight and if Juventus beat Zenit as expected tonight as well. So not exactly huge stakes in Group H. Just to briefly mention then, tomorrow night, if you're planning your week out, Group A, we're back to the start. Man City versus Club Brugge. City very much with their eyes on top spot right now. Can't afford to mess up tomorrow night, but given how much they dominated them in Belgium, you would expect it would be a massive shock for them to get beaten, and it would take a defeat for them to be in real trouble. And then RB Leipzig versus PSG is the other game in that group. Leipzig have been so disappointing so far, have lost all their games. PSG top on 7 points. But if Leipzig somehow win this game and City somehow stutter, then we've got a group in our hands. Then we've got a proper 3-horse race. But I wouldn't be holding my breath. Then Group B, of course, is Liverpool's group. Liverpool Atletico tomorrow night. Win. Liverpool are through. They're in really good shape. But the other game is the one to watch out for. Because what you've got is Atletico looking over their shoulder at Porto at the moment. They're both on 4 points. Milan have yet to get off the mark just yet. They're at home to Porto tomorrow night. They've obviously just come off the back of a big win against Roma at the weekend. They're out if they lose, but if they win, they'll only be a point behind Porto, and if Atletico win as well, they'll only be a point behind Atletico as well. So that could completely shake things up. Milan versus Porto tomorrow night, worth watching. And then the final 2 groups, Group C, Dortmund versus Ajax, the return leg. The hammering dished out by Ajax a couple of weeks ago. Dortmund at home this time, looking for a bit of revenge. If they get that, if they win, they both go on to 9 points, and it'll become a head-to-head really for top spot over the next little while. But it's not curtains on Sporting just yet. They're at home to Besiktas. They won 4-1 in Turkey in the last game, so they're well in contention if they make that 6 points against the Turks, and especially if Dortmund get beaten, Sporting will have a great chance of qualifying. And then finally, of course, Group D with our favourite team, Sheriff. They're at home to Inter Milan. Inter won the previous leg of this 3-1. But Sheriff having 2 wins already just complicates this whole thing, because even if they put their backs to the wall tomorrow night, park the bus against Inter Milan and get a draw, it will put this group into chaos. They'll be in great shape. They'll be on 7 points if that happens. So Sheriff versus Inter Milan, have that on your app, have that score up, and then watch the last 20 minutes if it's still 0-0. The other game in that one is Real Madrid against Shakhtar. 5:45 kickoff. It's the early one tomorrow. Madrid hammered Shakhtar away from home last time, so this is more than likely going to be the week that Real Madrid take a real stab at taking control of that group. So that is a very quick run through of the Champions League fixtures. We're going to have John Duggan talking Spurs in just a moment.
Technically you can have both. There can be a little bit of contact and you can dive.
Well, you tell me which one of them weren't fouls.
Look, technically they are fouls, of course.
No, which one of them weren't fouls in your mind?
No, what I'm saying is technically...
Give me the examples of the ones that weren't fouls.
Technically they are fouls, but also...
No. Therefore, they're technically fouls.
Harry Kane, my point is that Harry Kane could definitely have stayed on his feet.
No. If they're technically fouls, take out technically. They're fouls. You just said it yourself.
Yes, indeed. Harry Kane, is he a happy man this morning, John?
He should be. And if he's not a happy man, maybe he should be a nervous man.
Go on.
Well, Antonio Conte is going to skin everybody alive when he comes to...
Is this Harry Kane not somebody who
the new White Hart Lane? Well, Harry Kane has got no choice unless he is prized away by another club and there's a fee accepted for him. And Conte goes in there and has a chat with Paratici and Daniel Levy and says, you know what, I want to rebuild the team here. I know he's only got 18 months, it appears, from the deal that's meant to be reported to be agreed for today. But Harry Kane needs to step up. Like, this is no longer on the manager. This is on the players. This is on Daniel Levy. What a Tonawanabe. And because Antonio Conte is not going to be on him. Not after winning 3 titles at Juventus, not after winning a title in his first season with Chelsea and getting 93 points. And I know very well because that was the season Spurs were second and Chelsea were relentless that season. Not when you win then another trophy the following season, didn't have the best of seasons, got sacked as you do at Chelsea, then wins Serie A with Inter Milan, hadn't won a domestic title in Italy for 11 years. It's not going to be on anybody else but Daniel Levy, Joe Lewis and the players if they don't succeed with Antonio Conte. Give him what he wants. It's a fantastic signing. I can't believe it. Look, I'm generally an optimistic person. I was happy with Jose. I'm happy with big marquee names. But the thing about Jose is that Jose, I suppose, we now know had been in decline. We were maybe thinking maybe just Man United didn't work out for him and he'll come back and bounce back as an underdog manager at an underdog club. Didn't work out. But I think Conte, you can't say that he's a man with his best behind him. You can say that he's a man still that has a lot to offer. And I'm really excited about it. And Man United's dithering over this has given Spurs a great manager. So thank you, Man United. Thank you, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And the best of luck.
We've got a buzzing John Duggan in studio this morning, I think it's fair to say.
Well, that's the first time for everything.
Well, I mean, and it's been a good week for you, John.
It has. I don't know how many virtual insanity diehards there were with 4 tournaments to go in the 2021 season. But Lucas Herbert did come through. There it is, yeah, it's on the screen. Lucas Herbert, as we said, we were talking about Bermuda, yourself, Jared, myself, the other day, and I went for it, and it came off. And I watched the tournament last year. I actually tipped Lucas Herbert at the Irish Open, so I owe him a pint of Foster's if I ever see him in Ireland again. But yeah, it's funny how 1 week can turn your year, and we're going to end up in a year in profit. 49% profit with 3 tournaments to go. Not bad, better than a bank.
Absolutely. Congratulations. So that leaves you in good shape as a result of a choppy enough season, but I mean it was a hard one to predict by and large.
Well, it's funny because I ended up with 60-1, 33-1, 22-1, 12-1 and 9-1 winners and places at 150, 150 and 175, but I still think a lot of things didn't go right. Therefore, it always says to me, look, you got to do this responsibly. I really do believe there's opportunities in golf, and thankfully my faith in myself, whether anybody else had any left, paid off.
I thought you were going to say there, but thankfully my faith in my God got me through, and many decades of rosary finally came to fruition. What's going on this morning, John?
Well, there's this. This is obviously going to be confirmed today with Antonio Conte, 18-month deal. I suppose the good thing for Conte is there's a buffer. The buffer is Fabio Paratici, the new managing director of football at Tottenham, whom he worked with at Juventus. So if you saw the Amazon documentary, you would know that it was very much Daniel Levy and Jose having chats, and ultimately it didn't succeed. There's a buffer now between the football, effectively the technical director, and Antonio Conte, which is very interesting. If you're Dele Alli, if you're Harry Winks, do you get another chance? He is a disciplinarian. He is somebody that is very much, if you look at it, based on attention to detail, but also he wants a family atmosphere. There was that story that he had a kind of a fake boxing match with Lautaro Martinez at Inter Milan after they had a bit of a fallout. So I think he does have a sense of humour. And if you read anything about like Cesc Fabregas or Victor Moses or Marcos Alonso, he gets the best out of players. He's improved everywhere he's gone. He's improved. Barry, Inter, Juve, and obviously the Italian national team as well, which were at quite a low ebb when he was with them at the Euros. So it is a very exciting appointment. I just hope he's not put in a straitjacket and stifled, because Tottenham, this is it now. And maybe Joe Lewis, the owner, I know everybody talks about Daniel Levy, but the man really who's behind all of this is Joe Lewis. He owns the club. He lives in the Caribbean. He's 84 years of age. He's worth over $4 billion. They've done a fantastic job as business people with the stadium and everything like that. The Spurs were worth about 20 million in 2001. They're probably worth about 2 billion now, just as an asset for anybody to come in and buy in London. I really just hope that they open the wallet now for Antonio Conte, because you'd hope that they'd be able to get some good signings in there. So that's what's going on Spurs-wise. It'll be interesting to see what happens for the opening game away to Everton on Sunday. Everton struggling a bit. 3 defeats now in a row in the Premier League. 2-1 to Wolves last night. They were shoddy defensively in the first half. Bruno Lage doing a good gig there. They've won 4 of the last 5, and they probably should have won 5 in a row if it wasn't for the concession of a late goal against Leeds. Man United against Atalanta tonight. Will Solskjaer play 3 at the back? He was speaking about criticism and almost like a bring it on wrestling style press conference, as much as Solskjaer can be that way, in his general, flat tone in the way he speaks. But he seems to be defiant, and that's good for him. Pogba, of course, could feature tonight against Atalanta. That's an 8 o'clock start initially. If United win, you'd have to think they're pretty much there for the last 16. It's easier for Chelsea. They got Malmo away. They should be into the environment of the last 16 if they win that game. Obviously, they've got Juventus in the group as well. There were action last night. Finn Harps and Drogheda drew 0-0 in the League of Ireland Premier Division. Both clubs had players sent off, so down to 10 men. What it means is that Waterford now have got the chance to overtake Finn Harps and get out of that relegation playoff spot if they can take a point against Derry City tonight, 6:15 start. We also did a dress rehearsal for the FAI Cup final. Pats were 2-0 against Bohemians before Bohemians equalised and brought it back to 2-2, and Sligo Rovers beat Longford 1-0. So that's the kind of the football paradigm. No look for the Irish at the Melbourne Cup. Very elegant, kind of spelt that way, 1 for the home side. James McDonald riding for Chris Waller, 17-1. Twilight Bayman, who won the race for Aidan O'Brien last year, was only 11th. There's a meeting at Ferry House today, 8 races, with the first off at 12:15. And Joe Schmidt is back in work as well, as opposed maybe in an advisory role as a support coach for Auckland Blues. He was there as an assistant between 05 and 07 and still keeping himself involved in the game. Maybe not in a very intense way, but still involved a couple of years on from his decision to step down as Ireland coach.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that, whether or not it's a stepping stone back into a real head coach role for him over the next little while. John Duggan, great stuff. Thanks a million. We're going to run through some of the sports pages and we'll bring you up to speed on OTBSports.com first of all this morning. So Mourinho, like Conte, will be better at Manchester United. That's Marcotti, who was on with Joe on last night's football show. You can get that and watch that back on all the usual spots. The story you mentioned there about Joe Schmidt up on the homepage as well. Former Ireland coach Schmidt joins Blues coaching staff. And then that story about Sergio Aguero, who removed himself from the pitch, from the field of play at the weekend with chest pains. Aguero's now out for at least 3 months after complaining of chest pains. Antonio Conte, not a good fit for Tottenham, says Pat Nevin. That view is certainly out there, and it's been voiced by a lot of people who know a hell of a lot about the game. It'll be really interesting to see, have we rushed into this a little bit too much? Have we been carried away a little bit by what he did with Chelsea, and whether or not those skills are going to be readily available to him at Tottenham, and whether or not they'll be able to take Tottenham to where they want to go? And then there is that Gary Keegan story that he has joined the Cork backroom team. A really shrewd appointment, I would suggest, from everybody in Cork GAA there. So the back of the Mirror this morning, just to continue some of the sports pages which we touched on earlier on. And decked is their headline here. Spurs turn to Conte after Nuno's sacking. Meanwhile, Emery in line for Toon job. Newcastle ready to announce their new manager this week, with ex-Arsenal boss Unai Emery the leading contender for the job. So Darren Lewis is reporting that final interviews are set to be held, with a plan to have the new man in place for the trip to Brighton on Saturday and to have the international break to get to know the Newcastle managers. So the Newcastle players, I should say. So Unai Emery, that will be a really interesting appointment. Obviously, it seems that when you look at his career as a whole, Paris Saint-Germain and certainly Arsenal seem like blots on an otherwise impeccable copybook, I think it's fair to say. I think what he's done in Spain since leaving the Arsenal job has been really impressive. The back of the Irish Sun, the full Conte is their headline. Nuno acts as Levy all in for Antonio. Italians' £15 million deal and £150 million to spend. John Duggan made the point earlier on that the pressure is now on the board and on the players, but if the manager has £150 million to spend over the next couple of windows, then the pressure would certainly be on Conte next season to deliver something special. Ole says, now we must go again, and the Jim Reaper is their headline on Jimenez scoring last night his first goal at Molineux for quite some time. The Daily Telegraph sports section leads with Conte ready to sign £20 million Spurs deal. Former Chelsea manager is expected to be confirmed today. The Irish Times, meanwhile, the lead in their sports section is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Keep that coming, he says. Ole insists he enjoys the criticism. Meanwhile, Thomas Tuchel gets on his strikers' backs. In fairness, a couple of his strikers haven't been available for the last couple of games. Timo Werner and Romelu Lukaku, of course, got injured a couple of weeks ago, and it's their full-backs, their wing-backs, I should say, who've been delivering a lot of the scoring load for them. And Conte poised to take over at Tottenham is their headline there. So that really is the main sports story this morning, the Antonio Conte imminent appointment. The Guardian go with that as well. Back to the future, Spurs move quickly to hire Conte after sacking Nuno. The Herald, Ole, I've got no time for sulking players. United boss warns forwards left out against Spurs to channel frustrations properly. And then it is Solskjaer on the back of the Irish Independent. Solskjaer warns his players, "I've got no time for sulkers." United boss urges Reds to channel frustration in the right way ahead of clash against Atalanta. And a couple of other interesting bits there. Colin McKee's writing that Gavin is the man to help GAA president get championship reform back on track. He's writing that a new committee will need to be set up, or a new task force, to look at a new proposal for championship reform, and Jim Gavin should be a voice on that committee, writes Colin Keys. And then Cian Tracy writing this morning that ticket sales are slow for Japan clash as Farrell calls up Hanson. So Shane, this is obviously a little bit of a worry for the IRFU. Obviously they've struggled with coronavirus, as everybody has, on a financial level. That's why we've seen a return to 2019, 2018 ticket prices when it comes to the All Blacks game. 60 to 100 euros what the ticket prices range from for the Japan clash, and at this point it doesn't look like it's going to be a sellout.
Yeah, it's a bizarre one, isn't it? Because you thought, and look, a lot of us who enjoy attending live sport, and most people watching and listening this morning will be in that bracket, held our breath for the last year and a half, whatever it was, without live sport. And promised ourselves that once it came back, we would attend. And look, I've made the most of that since sport reopened, and certainly attended a lot of it. But I'm surprised that a lot of rugby fans aren't just snapping up these tickets. I don't know. Look, again, the IRFU have said, look, maybe there's going to be this late ticket surge towards the end of the week, but by all accounts, it doesn't seem like they're going to sell it out. Like the prices, yeah, 60 to 100 quid. Steep enough, but I guess you're going to get top quality rugby. Ireland-Japan is a decent match. I know tickets are still available for that Argentina game on November 21st. The All Blacks game, obviously a sellout, but it's a bit bizarre. Like, you'd imagine now, live sport, everyone is getting on this bandwagon. Everyone wants to do it. Everyone wants to go out and smell as Andy Mitten said on this show, I think a couple of weeks ago, smell the chipper vans on the way to the match, smell the burgers, chat to the people selling programs outside, have a pint with your mates, in a pub near the stadium. Like, you cannot beat going to the Aviva Stadium to watch a match of rugby. Ireland against Japan, it's a decent game of rugby. You'd almost urge anyone who's on the fence about going to a live sport at the moment, or even taking their kids to it, to just bite the bullet and do it, because the All Blacks tickets are the hottest tickets in town. If you can't get those, the Japan game's a decent match. The Argentina game in a couple of weeks is also a decent game as well. So. Very, very surprised, I think, Eoin, is the emotion a lot of people will feel when they realise that this game isn't a sellout. And it's Tuesday. They still have a few days to sell some tickets and put more bums on seats. But, a worrying enough one. Really, really surprising as well.
Yeah, we've got a text in here from Jim, who says, "Why would you go to a game you know they will win and play the same old players? They always do." And Joe says, "It's not bizarre. Who would want to go and watch the same boring rubbish rugby as last year?" Which is an interesting point of view. I would say that maybe there's that viewpoint out there about the style of play. Whether or not that we know they're going to win is an entirely different story. I mean, you know what Japan did to Ireland in the World Cup, but I do think it's probably been forgotten, some of the other recent fixtures between Ireland and Japan, and maybe people kind of see Shizuoka as a bit of as an outlier in the relationship and the rivalry between Ireland and Japan. One way or the other, though, I guess it does prove why we do see very strong teams in these November internationals. They do want to fill the place out. People do want to pay and see the stars. They don't want to come in, pay 60 to 100 euro and see a development squad, I guess. And it's not just when it comes to the Six Nations. These are also really important commercial fixtures for the IRFU as well, especially in the context of everything else that's happened over the last little while. So even when we go through the last couple of November internationals pre-pandemic, literally just kind of this is very much a straw piece of research here, but Ireland, Argentina, 10th November 2018, an attendance of 52,000, which is a fairly healthy attendance. They played Italy in Chicago before that, so we can't really judge that, and I presume the All Blacks game then was a sellout. In fact, according to Wikipedia, there was more people in for the Argentina game than there was for the New Zealand game, with 51,000 here, but obviously both sellouts on this occasion, so it would be a little bit of a step down from 2018 where these games not to sell out.
Yeah, and the point about the team, regardless of the opposition, and look, Japan will be tougher opposition than some people might suggest, but Ireland will put out a full-strength team. There's no doubt about it. Andy Farrell is going to put out a full-strength team against the Japanese. So it's an opportunity for people to see these players up close. if you haven't been to an Irish match, if your kids haven't been to an Irish match, it's an opportunity. And look, I have no skin in this game, but I'm just saying, live sport generally, if rugby is your thing, why not get out and do it? The other point about it is that, look, the FAI quite recently will be absolutely delighted to kind of boost the coffers a bit with a sellout for the Portugal game, given that the year that these organisations and sporting bodies have had financially, no doubt. The IRFU will be sweating about this. This is a cash-strapped IRFU, you know, counting the cost of the last year and a half, as are most sporting bodies, not just in Ireland but across the world, with the absence of live sport. And they'll really be sweating, looking on here and thinking, okay, we need to sell this out. It's important. It's important for the industry. It's important for the rugby body in this country. And look, maybe it will sell out between now and Saturday, and this narrative will disappear. But it doesn't look likely. So yeah, it's a worrying one.
What's interesting as well, like, I mean, if you're just going back to a few more of these 2018 Test matches, like Ireland played USA at home, and according to Sky Sports, according to Autumn International's UK and a couple of other sources, there was 51,000 people there for Ireland against the USA, which is remarkable actually, that they managed to essentially sell that game out. Maybe ticket prices were relatively forgiving considering it was USA in town. It was not Ireland's first choice team whatsoever, and still people showed up to watch them. I guess maybe there's also the factor here, Shane, that when these games get up and running, it becomes a little bit like a boulder rolling down a hill, where it becomes an event that people want to be at, and people haven't been at these games for quite some time, and that maybe after the All Blacks game, people will be like, oh geez, I really need to get to the next game. And in 2018, if we think back to it, this was a pretty hot ticket going to watch the Ireland team, because we all thought they were going to win the World Cup the following year. We all thought they were going to do a little bit better than they did. I think it's fair to say they were close to becoming the number one team in the world. They eventually did become the number one team in the world that autumn. That maybe there is a process here of rebuilding back to that level, that it has just come off that edge a little bit over the last 2 years.
There's the status thing as well. Like, if a lot of people want to get to the All Blacks game, and you don't have to be a rugby fan to want a ticket to Ireland against the All Blacks. It's almost a thing like, where were you when? Like, if Ireland do beat the All Blacks in a couple of weeks, you want to be there. You want to have the match ticket, have the match programme stuck away in your closet for the next 30, 40 years, or bring it out for the grandkids. Like, it's one of those games in sport. But I almost feel like if the All Blacks game had been first, the order of the game is a little bit unfortunate in that point, but I see why the Japanese game is a build into the All Blacks match from a playing point of view. But from a supporting point of view, if the All Blacks game had been first, I think that impact that you mentioned, like, people will be watching that game and going, geez, I better get to this next
unless
match.
They get hammered.
Well, unless they get hammered, of course. But if it's a decent match, if they get not necessarily a result, but put in a performance against the All Blacks, people will be like, okay, Japan game second, Argentina game third, let's get to those games if we can. Much easier to get tickets as well for those matches, understandably. But yeah, maybe the order is a little bit unfortunate from the fan point of view, but I guess makes sense from a playing perspective for Andy Farrell.
Yeah, for sure. Patrick's been in touch to say the Japan game will be an excellent game. I was at the World Cup. This will be worth the money. Japan, one of the most exciting teams to watch in the world. So that's kind of what you want. That's kind of the ideal scenario from this weekend, is that Japan bring the excitement and Ireland actually get the result, and people want to get behind that team again. I guess for the Argentina game in particular, the New Zealand game is not going to be an issue whatsoever when it comes to getting people in through the turnstiles. Right, we're going to be chatting to Rebecca Clancy shortly about the Formula 1 Mexico this weekend. 5 races to go, but first we're sticking with rugby, because here's Matt Williams on Ireland centre options.
I think I'd love to see Frawley get time at 12, as the Kiwis say, a second 5. It's like a second out half, a second 5'8", as we call them in the south. And he's probably more solid in that. You have Joey on the bench with Zebo. There's 2 creative players on the bench. And Gary Ringrose, if he's given time, and what do I mean by that? If he's got quick hands inside him to give him a few steps with a ball in hand, Gary is a quality player and can also shift the ball. But I don't, and I have not liked. I'm feeling very bad because I'm a great admirer of Bundiak. I'm a fan. I love the way he plays, but he's a power athlete for my books, and I really enjoy and I really respect him. I'm not talking him down in any way, but it's about getting combinations. It's like your back row. You can't pick 3 open sides in your back row. You've got to have that combination, and your 10, 12, 13. You know, it's a mixture together. It's what are the best mixtures that make them work the best. And I'm just not sure that when you use him, you got to use him for a specific role and a specific way. And I'm just not sure that Ireland's got that right. I'm agreeing with Niamh said there. When in the end of the last year's Six Nations, Ireland played great rugby against England. They were fantastic, and at home they've been really hard. So they're not far away.
Yeah.
But we're talking about let's come back again. How are you going to win a quarterfinal? So to win a quarterfinal, you've got to beat one of the top four. Playing the way they're going, are they going to beat one of those top four? Right now, you've got to say it's highly, it's percentages against them. So they've got to make progress in the next 2 years, and that's one way they've got to do it.
Yeah, great stuff from Matt Williams and Niamh Briggs on Monday Night Rugby. You can catch the full thing back on the OTB Sports app or on youtube.com/offtheball. Plenty of reaction coming through to us throughout the morning. Thomas says, Eoin with his audition for Soccer Saturday host there, Champions League. Thank you very much, Thomas. While Dara says no Gilroy, no party. So you get a compliment, you get a slap in the back. It's how it works. Thanks for getting in touch. Philip says Ole has blocked the path to the first team for the youth players by giving silly contracts to Mata, etc., filling spots on the bench with pointless players. Changing a system was a cop-out. He's been 2 years telling us this is his project and long-term plan. He is essentially doing the caretaker job again. The wheels turn very, very slowly on the United job. Fergus says, I wouldn't recognise Verstappen. And Jared says, I can't see Conte and Levy working together. He walks or sulks if he doesn't get his way, and Levy won't give him his way. That is one of the possible outcomes here where this whole thing blows up, Shane.
Yeah, it's it's going to go one of two ways, and we saw it in the documentary between Levy and Mourinho. They have their moments of getting along, they have their moments of not getting along. At least they have that director of football gap between Conte and Levy now that might make things a little bit easier. I enjoyed some of those comments. So one thing as well I wanted to mention on this morning's show, and these were the rumours coming out, and they're coming out this morning hotter than ever, is that the odds have been slashed on Roy Keane to enter the I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here jungle. Owen, I don't know if you saw this story.
No, I haven't.
So this, obviously, the jungle Anton Deck gets underway in Wales in mid-November, so he doesn't have to travel all the way to Oz. It's in Wales in a castle because of COVID. There have been a lot of sports people in the jungle over the years, even from a snooker perspective. I remember Steve Davis and Jimmy White both in it at some point or another. Ian Wright was in as well, wasn't he, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah. Loads of them. But Roy Keane in the jungle, I mean, he's joined Instagram. He's let loose a bit. He's starting to do impersonations of Harry Maguire. I think he's at that stage in his life now. If he's not being offered a job in management in the next month or two, this could be intriguing, Owen. So,
I mean, is this obviously a way of just getting people to click into an article about Roy Keane, or is this legit?
Yes.
Is there okay, that's disappointing. You have my hopes up there for a moment that this would actually happen, because that would be unquestionably fascinating.
Well, he's now, if I'm looking at certain bookmakers' odds, he's been listed as short as 1 to 4.
Wow, okay.
And he is one of the favourites to make the list. So, I don't know where they get their figures from, but that's quite short. So maybe it's not clickbait.
That's not a novelty. That's not a novelty bet there. That is market forces dictating that, and there is obviously a connection with ITV. I mean, we're analysing this already before it's even been announced. So let's wait and see. But we will bring you daily updates. We promise you that if it happens, because those sweet clicks. It is 2 minutes past 9. We are going to be chatting about Formula 1 in just a moment. Rebecca Clancy of the Sunday Times is on hold. Chat to you in a few.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Liverpool fans won't want to miss our latest Cadbury FC Roadshow. We're going behind the scenes at Anfield with legendary striker Robbie Fowler.
We'll also be joined by Liverpool captain and Irish international Niamh Fahey and former Liverpool midfielder and physio Richie Partridge.
It's all with thanks to Cadbury FC and their club partnerships, granting you behind the scenes access at the Premier League's biggest clubs.
Coming soon to OTB Sports social channels.
Radio and audio in Ireland has never been more powerful, more effective, or had more opportunity for growth. And now Radio Centre Ireland is here, we're looking to accelerate. To do that, we're looking for a CEO with a focus on increasing advertising investment and championing radio's unique advantages that make it so effective, flexible, and impactful. We need a candidate with the experience, credibility, and vision to lead, drive, influence, shape, and grow this industry. Someone who will be our voice, representing and promoting radio to commercial partners and agencies alike as a medium that delivers return on investment. If that's you, we want to hear from you. And we know we will, because radio works. Apply now. Visit radiocenterireland.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, proud supporters of Movember. Gentlemen, let's move.
You're welcome back. It is time to return our attention to Formula One. We're in Mexico this weekend. 5 races before the end of the season over the course of 6 weeks, and it is an absolute titanic struggle between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Delighted to welcome Rebecca Clancy of The Times and The Sunday Times to the show. Rebecca, good morning.
Good morning.
I was reading your piece yesterday from the United States, chatting about Texas and the real interest in this thing over in the United States, that it had made so many attempts to crack the US in the past, but all of a sudden it's happened in explosive fashion this season.
Yeah, Austin is always a great race weekend. It's a brilliant city in itself, but it's always a really fun weekend. And this is my 5th season, and in the years that I've been to Austin, I've never seen anything like I've seen this year. Normally you go, it's always well attended, as sort of about 300,000 of a weekend, so it's always just shy of what we get at the British Grand Prix. But this year it was absolutely bonkers. There were people everywhere in F1 tops. I mean, right from McLaren, Mercedes to Haas. I saw people actually wearing T-shirts with just the F1 logo on. You couldn't, for love nor money, get a restaurant reservation at all. If you didn't have a reservation, you'd walk into a restaurant, they'd look at you like you were a bit, what are you doing here? And then you'd be told to wait up to 2 hours for a table. It was just impossible. And then if you were a bit like myself and not particularly organised and you were late booking a hotel room, it was almost impossible to get a hotel room. So, it was crazy. And they're saying that the numbers were 400,000. And normally when they put the numbers out, I'm a bit sceptical, but I could probably believe there were 400,000 there this weekend. I mean, the circuit is about 11 miles outside of the city. And as anyone who's been to the States will know, they're huge roads, so traffic isn't really an issue. You kind of keep moving. But the journey was taking easily an hour. Just right. so many cars going in. It was very well attended.
How do American Formula One fans differ from, say, the British Formula One fans? Is there a different sort of culture like we see in other sports?
I guess so. In America, they're all up for the whole show, whereas when the British fans come, they're very engaged, they're exceptionally knowledgeable, not to say American fans aren't, but they are just there purely for what happens on the track and all of the stuff that happens around that, the sort of the fan zone that the new owners, Liberty Media, have set up, the concerts that they put on. They're not necessarily there for that, whereas when the American fans come, you know, in American sports, we see it with the NFL and in baseball, they're very much entire shows. And when Liberty took over, they said they wanted to create Super Bowls of every weekend. So big events, not just what happens on the track, but away from it. And the Americans have really got into that side of it. And so when they go for entire days. So, for example, the entire timing of what happens on the track in the States is all geared around what happens off the track. So I think it was 2018, there was a Taylor Swift concert in the evening on the Saturday of qualifying. But qualifying was at, I think, 2:00 and the concert was at sort of 7. And no one came to qualifying. And then the track was packed for Taylor Swift. Whereas now they've moved qualifying back, which is an absolute disaster for my print deadlines. But anyway, they've moved qualifying back to, I think it was at 5:00 this evening. So people go straight from qualifying into the concerts. And it was Billy Joel this year, so a brilliant concert. Everything is being geared around sort of the whole day rather than just as we get sort of in Europe, really, not just even the British Grand Prix, but it's much more focused on the track action.
So Taylor Swift in the crosshairs of Liberty Media and of the Formula One right now, it seems. Like that's a really interesting point you make about the businessmen that run Formula One and how they wanted to lean into the Americanization of sport. And like if you compare that to, say, even the Super League flirtation with football earlier in the year, there was this real sneeriness, rightly or wrongly, towards the perceived Americanization of football, and British football fans were really disgusted with those ideas as much as the grotesque capitalism. But is there a sense amongst even the traditional Formula One fans that this is all really good? It's great that we're leaning into this Americanization of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's an enormous market tap. We have a population of more than 300 million, and most of them seem to be obsessed with sport. So why would you not want to try and tap into that region? I mean, Liberty have done very well. They've obviously got the race in Austin, which existed before then, but now they've brought in a semi-street race in Miami. There's quite a lot of rumours, and from what I understand, they're very strong talks are going on about Las Vegas. Apparently they met with the Las Vegas potential promoter at the weekend in Austin. And one of the stumbling blocks there is that they want to use the Strip, and the casinos, as you can probably imagine, aren't too keen on the footfall dropping potentially from having a race on the Strip. So they're looking at that. But with the Americanization, I suppose part of that is this introduction of sprint races that we've seen at 2 races so far this year. And we're having it again in Brazil. And actually I was talking to Ross Brawn yesterday, who's the F1 Motorsport Director, and he was saying it's been a success. So the sprint race is, we have qualifying gets shifted to the Friday evening, then we have a sprint race, which is the third distance of the main race, and then that determines the starting grid of the race. And so there was a huge fan survey done this year, and avid fans, as they're called, or as F1 would call them, they didn't like the sprint race. They don't like the traditional format being tinkered with, and so they weren't that enamoured by it. And what a big problem also came with the fact that from qualifying is normally the pole position, whereas pole position now comes from whoever wins the sprint race, and actually the drivers don't like that either. So there's a lot of talk going on about that. But Ross Brawn was saying that basically the sprint race has been successful, and it was particularly successful for new fans. And what we're getting from America is a lot of new fans. And so, okay, we've got sort of millions, we're talking sort of 14, 15 million people watching races. And so it's really important to tap in to a larger group who, the younger audiences don't necessarily want to sit down and watch races for an hour and a half. So you have to give them something else. You have to keep adapting, evolve or die, as they say. So it's kind of looking at that. And that's the, Americanization of it, how you can make the weekend bigger. And it's all part of the Super Bowl of, normally. And I have to say, I am quite a bit of a fan of the concept of a sprint race, because Fridays traditionally are just practice, which is 2 60-minute sessions of the cars going round and round and round and round, which I appreciate is how some people feel about Formula One at the best of times. But it's not interesting. There's no, Friday doesn't really mean anything. So if you make the track action on Friday more interesting, then you do naturally get more people through the door. And as you can imagine, with there being 23 races next year, it's a record number. Apparently all 23 of those race promoters, the people who organise the races, have gone to F1 and said, we want the sprint race. So this idea of expanding weekends, of bigger parties, it does seem to be working.
Yeah, for sure, Rebecca, and I think you're right there. It's for the borderline Formula One fan. I think the sprint races are certainly a good thing, and I know the drivers seem to enjoy it as well. It makes the Friday a lot more interesting for the viewer. And if we discuss the on-track matters then from the Austin Grand Prix as well, and look, a very mature performance, you have to say, and I think Christian Horner used that word about Max Verstappen after the race, that there was a maturity level to his performance. That's an 8th win in 17 races for him. Hamilton's got 5 wins. We've got a couple of races coming up that maybe favour Red Bull, but looking back at that performance and the way Max handled the I guess the degradation on his tyres over that race, very, very mature performance from the young man.
It was absolutely brilliant, yeah. I spoke to Christian after the race, actually, and he said it was probably one of Max's best ever drives of his career, and I'd be inclined to agree. He was on pole for the race at a track which traditionally Mercedes and Hamilton have won at. Hamilton had won in the Circuit of the Americas 5 out of the 8 times that we had been there. So he was very dominant, and Max started on pole, but Lewis Hamilton came through and was leading at the first corner. Now, perhaps the Max Verstappen of old would lose his head a bit and, make a mistake or whatever. But he didn't. He was very calculated. He stayed within touching distance of Lewis Hamilton. And then Red Bull made a very, very aggressive strategy call. And they decided to bring Verstappen in very early, or what seemed to be very early. I think it was on the end of lap 12 of a 56-lap race. So it was always going to be a 2-stopper because, as you mentioned, tyre degradation at this track is huge. It seemed very early, but basically what they were doing is what's called the undercut. So Verstappen had nowhere to go. He was always running in Hamilton's dirty air, and Red Bull decided to pull him in and then put him into some clean air, and then he puts in he's on fresh tyres, puts in some really fast laps, and then by the time Mercedes had reacted and pulled Lewis Hamilton in 2 laps later, Verstappen was leading the race, and he was leading by 6.5 seconds. So it was a huge call that paid off massively. And then he managed the stint really well. And I don't like to go on about tyres too much because they are one of the more boring sides of F1. But Lewis Hamilton really struggled on that first stint, which is also one of the reasons that Verstappen was able to open up such a big gap when he did that pit stop in those 2 laps. But then the second stint, or middle stint as it were, Verstappen was very good. He managed the tyres very well, as you said. And then Red Bull went again. And then Mercedes, they pitted, and Mercedes said to Lewis, right, we're going to have to go long. And then it didn't end up being that long because, as you said, the tide degradation was so bad. So they pulled him in, and it looked like at that point when Hamilton came out from his second stop, he was about 8 seconds behind. And he really needed to close the gap. And he kind of stuck around 8 seconds for a while, and then he just started hammering lap after lap after lap. And he got down with 5 laps to go with 1.5 seconds, within 1.5 seconds of Verstappen. And Max Verstappen looked in his rearview mirrors and clearly thought to himself, yes, okay, there may be a 7-time world champion all over the back of me, but I can do this. And he put in a couple of really quick laps just to get a bit more breathing space, and that was enough. And that really was enough to hold off Hamilton at a track at which he had completely dominated at before. And for a lot of us who are commentating on the sport this year, for us, that was a really big moment in the championship. And if Verstappen does go on to win, that race in Austin will be quite a key moment. It wasn't just about Verstappen, who was a brilliant driver, but it was also Red Bull. They just out-strategized Mercedes completely. And it was fantastic to watch this battle. But Mercedes, Hamilton, they couldn't really respond to what Red Bull and Verstappen had done. And it was an exceptionally mature performance from both of them.
Yeah, exceptional performance for sure. I guess, Rebecca, if tyres are boring, one thing that's not boring is Martin Brundle's pit lane interviews and moments. For anyone who hasn't seen this particular moment with the rapper Megan Thee Stallion, I guess he tries to approach her and ask her to do a little off-the-cuff rap for the cameras. She kind of just looks at him and doesn't respond. One of her bodyguards or someone with her then says to Martin Brundle, it appears, you can't do this, you have to get away from us. And Martin's response is, I can do what I want because I just did. Interesting to see Martin's tweet. And look, these pit lanes, I know pit lanes are fairly manic at the best of times, but Martin's response on Twitter was quite considered. He said, I felt under pressure on the grid before, but by people called Senna, Prost, Schumacher, Mansell, Piquet and so on. Bodyguards visiting the grid for the first time don't bother me. Everyone's got a job to do, but they could maybe learn some manners and respect on our patch. And that's a fair point, I think, Rebecca.
Absolutely fair. I have to say, Megan Thee Stallion, in her defence, swiped away her bodyguard very quickly. What I will say on this one is it's really interesting. So Rory McIlroy was there with Aston Martin, and I spoke to a couple of the teams about this afterwards, about behaviour and do you prep the celebrities before they go on, what's expected? Because obviously Martin Brundle is a stalwart of Formula One, and he's been doing these grid walks for a very, very long time. And most celebrities who come, they're actually repeat celebrities. So they expect to see Martin Brundle pop up with a microphone in their face at some point. But for me, absolutely, there's no place for rudeness, and that bodyguard shouldn't be manhandling anybody. And I'm sure you probably all saw on the memes with the Harry Potter lookalike who came through at the end, as you said. Or the character, I can't remember. I don't watch Harry Potter, but apparently look like one of them. But anyway, it's down to the teams
Draco Malfoy was
to brief the celebrity. To brief the celebrities and their security detail as to the procedure and the etiquette on the grid. But one thing I'll say is I'm not entirely sure why she even had her security on the grid, because it's almost impossible to get onto the grid. It is the most controlled area you've probably ever been to in sport. It is ridiculously difficult to get onto. And so there's not going to be any random people there. There's no one who's going to be going up to, apart from maybe Martin Brundle for her, I suppose. She might not know who he is. But there's no one who can... There's no threat, as it were. So I'm not sure what her security detail were even doing on the grid. And I have to say, there are a lot of famous people. I say famous people, but I didn't know who they are, but I guess they're big in the States. And all you could actually see was their security detail. You couldn't even see them. And for me, with Formula One, with the celebrities get something out of going to a Formula One race. They get in front of a lot of eyeballs. It's good for their reputation. It's good for their exposure. And so part of that is a two-way deal. So they should really, part of it is to be doing these interviews. And that's what I mean when I say about the team's briefing, is that you should expect someone to come up to you and do a quick interview. And maybe it wasn't the best question, but, he doesn't know her. And it's just, he knew she was a rapper. So it's a bit of fun. And she took it quite well in her defense. The men around her, not so much. But I think the teams need to be briefing better on this one, because Martin Brundle, as we know, if there's a celebrity, he's going up to them and he's going to try and talk to them. And that's just the way it is. But there's absolutely, and there never will be, any place for rudeness.
Did Megan Thee Stallion enjoy her Formula One experience overall, do we know?
I've absolutely no idea. I presume so. I mean, she looked like she was... I am actually fortunate enough to be on the grid beforehand, and I cannot tell you the amount of times I've nearly had my head taken off by Martin Brundle's cameraman while I'm trying to duck out of shot. But because they're manic, it's absolutely manic. And actually, I have to say that grid was probably the busiest I've ever seen it. It certainly didn't feel like a time of COVID. But she looked like she was having a great time.
Yeah, Shaquille O'Neal, I think it looked like he was having a great time at the Grand Prix as well. Can I just ask you, Rebecca?
Shaquille O'Neal, apparently he was being interviewed by an American broadcaster, and I actually saw this happening. I was standing just to the side, and Shaquille O'Neal was having such a good time that the American broadcaster tried to walk off, and Shaquille O'Neal just grabbed him back and carried on talking.
Literally the first time that's ever happened to a journalist.
Yeah, exactly. He's having fun. Rebecca, can I just ask you about the really interesting comments the last few days from Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, and he's talking about this battle between Hamilton and Verstappen and how, look, if it goes down to the wire, we might have an incident where we've seen in years gone past with Schumacher, Villeneuve, and famously with Senna and Prost as well, where I guess the person ahead on points tries to take out the other driver. I think Wolff's comments were, if it was to come to the scenario of the last race in Abu Dhabi and they were to be racing each other for the title, whoever is in front on points is absolutely going to try to do the same as in the Senna Prost years. Like, we've seen them come together a couple of times this year, famously at Monza. Like, that's a tantalising prospect that in the last race we could see a really, really juicy battle between the two. Yeah, and there's very few people who don't expect it to go down to the last race in Abu Dhabi either. And as you said, there's been two fairly serious collisions this year, plenty of wheel-to-wheel, but two serious collisions, one in Silverstone and then, as you say, in Monza. And after that incident in Monza, actually, probably most of us expected there to be another incident. And there probably will be, because there's only 12 points between them. There's 5 races to go. As you mentioned at the start, the next 2 races tend to favour Red Bull, although this season, I don't even know where you put your money anymore, because, I mean, Russia and France were interesting this year and that's never happened before. So it's one of those seasons where you just don't know. It was really interesting coming from someone like Toto, because obviously he's speaking to Lewis Hamilton, his driver, all the time. Lewis Hamilton, I will say, though, is not a dirty driver. He doesn't have a reputation for it. I'm not saying Max Verstappen is a dirty driver at all, but he does take a more aggressive stance, shall we say, when racing. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm right on deadline and they go into each other and I have to do a complete rewrite at all, because that's how it's been going. And, you know, these aren't, Max is only 24, but he's not inexperienced. This is his 7th season. As I've said, Lewis Hamilton, he's 36. He's in his 15th season. He's got 7 world championships to his name. Both are very experienced now, both in very different places in their career, both racing with different levels of experience. I wouldn't have thought Lewis Hamilton would go into Max Verstappen. He's not really that kind of driver. We did see in 2016, when he ended up losing the title to his teammate then, Nico Rosberg, he tried to back up the field because Nico at that time was running second. And that was enough for Nico Rosberg to win the championship. And Lewis Hamilton was winning. So he was trying to slow everything down and back it all up so that someone would overtake Nico Rosberg. It obviously didn't happen, but that's, you know, within the rules. So it will be interesting to see how this goes. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the metal tangles again and we get some big explosive fireworks that don't just come out of the grandstands. It will be very interesting to see. But they are both very respectful drivers and they are both very acutely aware that any crash can be extremely serious. So I don't think it will be done too deliberately, shall we say.
The logic suggests that this weekend racing at altitude should suit Red Bull more than Mercedes, but this has been an unpredictable season. So before we let you go, Rebecca, how do you see this weekend going and how do you see these next 5 races going?
Yeah, it has been unpredictable, as I said. I would say this race this weekend in Mexico is definitely Red Bull. I would be surprised if they didn't. They've got an even better package than they've had in previous years. So I would really be surprised if Max Verstappen and even Sergio Perez, if we don't see a 1-2, which they've not actually had this season. In fact, the only team who's had a 1-2 this season is McLaren. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them 1-2, which will be quite damaging for Hamilton and for Mercedes. Brazil, then we go to the next week. Again, I think that will be a Red Bull track. And then we get into the unknowns. We have Qatar and we have Saudi, 2 tracks we've never raced at before. Saudi has a really long straight, which would favour the Mercedes, which has a faster straight line speed. But it can be a bit technical in sections. The same with Qatar, that's quite technical, so that would then favour Red Bull. And then we finish in Abu Dhabi, which has traditionally been a Mercedes track and a Hamilton track. But Max Verstappen there last year was absolutely amazing. He was on pole, he dominated the race, he dominated the entire weekend, really. So I have no idea.
I think you've done a pretty good job of whetting the appetite, though, for the next few weeks, Rebecca. A pleasure to chat to you. Thanks a million.
Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers. Rebecca Clancy there of the Times and the Sunday Times on the line there. So Mexico this weekend, lights out at 7 o'clock, Sheahan, I think. Is it on Sunday evening?
7 o'clock for qualifying on Saturday, and then 8 o'clock, I think, Irish time for the race on Sunday. Yeah.
Right, brilliant. Yeah, so it's one to look forward to. Right, we are almost out of time. We're going to get to a few quick bits. We're going to bring you some Monday Night Rugby, by the way, at 9:30. But first of all, here is Stewie Byrne on last night's football show reacting to Shamrock Rovers securing the title.
I mean, this is as old as time. This stuff. I used to always say this as well as a player. Like anytime we ever won a league, you always feel like you don't get the credit you deserve.
There's some good old League of Ireland begrudgery going on here.
It's siege mentality, Joe. It helps. It kind of helps.
So they didn't get a single player of the month in this league-winning season.
I think he's justified in that criticism. Like I wouldn't lead too much into those players. I think they're picked by the reporters.
Well, you know yourself.
Yeah, they don't know what to talk about, those reporters. Just me. I tell you what, Joe. Me and you should pick the player of the month every month next year.
I bow to your knowledge as ever.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be way ahead of me. But I think he's justified. But I think that sort of siege mentality, it helps if you can. If you can sort of direct it in the right way, okay, and in all the teams I played under, there wasn't a manager that didn't try to leverage that whole thing, and what's against them? Look, you need it. You need to, you need that hunger and that drive. You need to be criticised. It helps. You need pressure, Joe. Pressure is probably. I wrote my column there last Friday. I think pressure is the difference between being an average player and a really good player. Right. But it works. You need to be under pressure, and so therefore, you can't have positive without the negatives. And I'm trying to all the cliches here, but I think that's helped Rovers maybe get through what was a difficult period for them, and that difficult period I would have been end of March, April, early May. But I think it's justified. I think I certainly think Andrew certainly was justified in winning a player of the month.
Stewie Byrne there on the football show with Joe last night. You can get the full piece back on YouTube or on the OTB Sports app. Some reaction to the rugby chat earlier on, Shane. Stefan says, lads, these games are glorified friendlies, while Kieran says, if we had no warm-up, we'll get walloped. All Blacks coming off Rugby Championship, which is absolutely spot on. I think they looked absolutely sensational against Wales at the weekend. Then a couple on United, which I might put to you. Keane is not that foolish, says one commenter with regard to going into the jungle. And New Holland says, I am Ole out, but we need a plan after he leaves. Would rather wait until the summer when we should be able to get Poch or Ten Hag, who are both better options than Conte. Do you think Manchester United would be pretty okay with bouncing back if they don't get top four, Shane, if Conte somehow takes this the Spurs team to a top four, or if Leicester somehow get over the line, or maybe if Arsenal have an amazing surge as the season goes on and United actually don't crack the top four, that they'll be like, fair enough, we'll just get rid of Solskjaer then. Like, to me it seems that there's a great incentive to getting rid of the manager mid-season, because that top four spot really is up for grabs, and they really need to get it.
Yeah, you need progress year on year, and to be fair to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he finished 6th in his first season, then 3rd, then 2nd. He's been building slowly but surely, and the squad now is better on paper than the squad that finished 2nd last year. But they have to finish in the top 4 this season. There's absolutely no doubt about it. They cannot not be in the Champions League next season, because that's also going to affect, if Solskjaer does leave at the end of the season, what managers want the job. They don't want to necessarily take over a United team that's stuck in the doldrums of the Europa League. The likes of Cristiano Ronaldo isn't exactly a Europa League style player either. So there's pressure on. But I actually agree with that texter. I think, I was always, for quite a long time, Ollie in. I thought he was doing good things with the club, changing the philosophy of the club. Everything seemed positive. The players liked him, brought in good signings. I really, really was Ollie in for a long, long time. The Liverpool game, for me and a lot of other United fans who are maybe on the fence a little bit, the Liverpool game swung it to Ollie out for a lot of people. It has to be said. And look, you listen to Liverpool fans and fans of different clubs saying, "Oh yeah, Ollie in. Let's keep him at the wheel. No problem whatsoever. Let United ruin themselves from the inside out." But really, now that Conte has gone to Spurs, now that there's no obvious available manager that really could come in and change the club straight away. Pochettino, as Daniel Harris was saying, probably wouldn't arrive until the end of the season anyway. I would urge them probably to, and I think they don't need urging. I think they're going to do this anyway. They're going to stick with Solskjaer to the end of the season. I mean, if he wins tonight, pretty much guaranteed the Champions League knockout stages. I mentioned progress there, like 6th, 3rd, 2nd in the league. Even if they finish 4th in the league this season and have a decent run in the Champions League, you've got to look at points totals as well, because Chelsea, Man City and Liverpool have improved. If they can get in and around the points total that they got last season, it's unlikely that they will improve on it, but who knows? That will spell progress. Now, look, it's not what United fans want. United, if you support Manchester United or play for Man United or manage Manchester United, you want trophies at the end of the day. And losing the Europa League final last year on penalties to Villarreal was a real turning point for a lot of people. That was the trophy that they should have won. And I had said at the start of this season, if he doesn't win a trophy this year, he'll be in trouble. The FA Cup is obviously there for him if he wants it, maybe, and really go hard and put out a strong team throughout that competition. But I agree with the texter. I think stick with him until the end of the season. Even if you're Ollie out, I think you nearly need to be thinking along those lines now, because there needs to be a succession plan. So, it's the next few months are going to be interesting. And to be honest, this week is as fascinating a week as you're going to see at United, because the Spurs game is over. Atalanta tonight is huge, and it cannot be understated. And then the City derby at the weekend. I mean, heading into an international break, which gives a club's board time to ruminate and think about potential successors. They won't be doing that if they beat Atalanta and City. So 2 huge games for Solskjaer and co this week.
Aidan has been in touch to say, love the Formula 1 section, more please. I dare say over the next 6 weeks there will be plenty more, but you probably got Shane Hannon to thank for that this morning. Loves his Formula 1. We always gravitate to Formula 1 sections to the day that our Formula 1 expert is on the show with us. Well, I'm interested actually, Shane, in your perspective, just before we wrap this morning, just on that idea that, you know, there will be a Grand Prix in Miami and then Las Vegas. You'll have 3 races in the United States, and that, as we spoke with Rebecca earlier on, that they've really embraced how much America loves this thing and have gone unashamedly American in many respects with the pageantry around their race weekends.
Yeah, and look, from a European fan's perspective, you kind of think, oh, that's tougher for us to head over there and attend those races. But I see exactly why they're doing it. To be fair, they follow the money as well. Look, they've plenty of races in the Middle East. You've got Abu Dhabi, you've got Qatar, you've got Bahrain year on year, and Saudi Arabia now and added to the menu. I mean, clearly following the money there. And some of those races are pretty boring enough tracks, but money talks, and I can see why they want to go to America. Like the fans in America, you just saw it at the weekend by watching. They're crazy, and look, the drivers enjoy it. Like Daniel Ricciardo was walking around in a cowboy hat and boots around the track. Like he's an Australian, he's not from Texas. He spoke in interviews, I think, in a kind of deep south Texan accent as well. For entire interviews of 3 or 4 minutes long, which was a man sticking to his craft. But they embrace it. And look, I know even like you have to look at the cities as well where these things take place. Like Rebecca spoke about Austin. Like I was there myself. I was actually at the track myself for not quite a Taylor Swift concert, but it was a Willie Nelson concert.
Same thing.
Willie Nelson's 4th of July Christmas party in 2019. I was there at the Circuit of the Americas track. Like it's probably the second reason I'd want to be at that track after probably the Austin Grand Prix. So really, really fascinating place. And Austin, it's like this little liberal stronghold in the heart of red Texas. You know, it's a bizarre spot at a university town, and I can only imagine it comes to life during the Grand Prix. And you think of 300, 400,000 people, it's extraordinary. But yeah, the interest in Formula 1 has just skyrocketed.
Yeah, it absolutely has. So more on that over the next few weeks. Things have heated up and it's been an incredible season. Shane, enjoy Atalanta Manchester United tonight. I'm sure you'll watch it nervously. That is our lot for this morning. Just a reminder, you've been watching OTB AM with Gillette, proud sponsors of Movember. Gentlemen, let's mow. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio today. From 1 o'clock, speaking of Formula 1, we've got Nigel Mansell, which is OTB Gold, the Dadcast from 3 o'clock, and then a career retrospective with Packy Bonner from 4 o'clock. OTB Gold is Jason Sherlock from 6, and then on your radios from 7 o'clock as ever is Off the Ball. Tomorrow morning we will be with Kenny Cunningham, Andy Mitten and Caoimhe O'Neill. Nathan Murphy will be with me in studio for that one. Right now though, we're bringing you Monday Night Rugby. Here is Matt Williams and Niamh Briggs with Joe.
Monday Night Rugby, much going on. Very happy to bring in Matt Williams. Hello, Matt.
G'day, Joe. How are you, mate?
Yeah, very well. And Niamh Briggs, long time no talk.
Hi, Joe. Good to be back.
Good to have you back. So, Eddie Jones, we're going to get on to Ireland preparations. We're going to get on to New Zealand, Wales. Eddie Jones popped up in a few places. Matt, you were talking about him in a very interesting piece in your Irish Times column this week. But it's in the London Times where Eddie Jones and his methods have really become the centre of much focus. So, Owen Slot there spoke to former players and members of staff, generally on the basis of anonymity, which I'm sure Eddie Jones loves. And so, in effect, it comes across as a fairly tough regime. There's a high turnover of staff. So, for instance, the piece says, in every department, the turnover is high. Coaches, doctors, psychologists, physios, analysts. The fact is that the churn of Jones's staff is unmatched anywhere in the world game. And the reason is clear. Working for Jones is a relentlessly intense experience. And Jones can be a brutal employer. Verbal abuse, pressure, belittling is how one former employee described it. Brutal, rude, aggressive were the words of one player describing the way Jones treats his staff. Now, John Mitchell, I'm sure people have seen, the defence coach, recently departed. He went to Wasps, and there's an anecdote there whereby on the summer tour, John Mitchell was of the opinion he had a day off, and it was a day off generally for the squad, and he wanted to go and see his son Darryl, who's an international cricketer, play a match. And Jones seemed to ask him where he was going, and he told him, and he said, "Oh no, you're not, there's work to be done." And Mitchell went anyway. And so not long after that kind of a moment, the departure of Mitchell happens. And there are other anecdotes, player turning up and a bit beaten up, been a tough couple of weeks with the club. And Jones allegedly, because I'm sure, in fairness to Jones, he may have a different recollection here, but Jones welcomes the player. "How you doing? How you feeling? Welcome aboard." And the player says, "Yeah, no, I'm good. Bit tired. Been a tough couple of weeks." And the response from Jones is not really armour in the shoulder territory. Is tired. We don't want effing tired players here. You can F off if you're tired. And that kind of a vibe. So, Matt Williams, are you shocked?
I mean, I'm quite surprised that everyone is shocked. I mean, like if anyone, I coached against Eddie, getting on to 25 years ago. And, so what's changed? But listen, let's spin this on its head a bit. The guy's a winner. I don't like Eddie Jones. We're not friends, but I respect him. I have great respect for the guy. He has churned through assistant coaches for 25 years. A great friend of mine who I won't name because he hasn't given me permission, but the story he tells, very similar to Mitchell's, except it was 2 a.m. and his phone rings in his hotel room. "Get up here, we need to do line-outs." And he says, he's in bed like, have I slept in? Have I slept in? Is it 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock we're going to be? It's 2 a.m. And people use the term workaholic and they throw it around. That's what Eddie is. He's a workaholic. He's had a stroke. He drives himself as hard as he drives others. Do I think that's right, or am I condoning it? Absolutely not. And I'm not. I certainly hope I wasn't ringing up any of my coaches at 2 a.m. to do that, but I certainly hope people don't say that. But you've got to put this in the other side. You got the World Cup final with Australia. You got the World Cup final with England, and England needed some serious change. He was assistant coach in winning a World Cup with South Africa, and he's won Super Rugby. Now, there's not a lot of people around the world can say that. Is it a surprise that he's that sort of person? Absolutely not. The stories his ex-players tell are absolutely hilarious. But I also heard a lot of his ex-players deeply respect the guy. But I'm not justifying it, and I can't believe I'm actually going to bat for Eddie Jones here. I can't believe it. But I'm not surprised by that at all. But let's keep it in perspective. He drives people. He has incredibly high standards. Should there be bullying and pushing? Absolutely not. You've also got to understand, and I will say this, an Australian sense of humour, which a lot of people don't get, where Eddie does say, we do say things like that to each other, and people take it seriously and it shouldn't be, Eddie has done that with me and lots of people. You hear him in press conferences, don't listen to anything he says in the press conference. He's telling fibs. He's hiding something. But that's the man. The man's complicated, but he's a winner. He's completely obsessed. And I'm not surprised in one little bit.
Yeah, no, he runs a tight ship, Niamh, that much is clear. And if he had won a World Cup, for instance, this kind of a piece is mere millimetres from being flipped on its head, and we could be using phrases like intensity, or that he's ruthless, or at times it's brutal, and it would be an article of celebration almost. This is how it's done. This is what it's about at top level sport. So I have a degree of sympathy for him as well here, I have to say, especially when it's a bunch of anonymous quotes being used about him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Paul Gustard was the only one named really properly, and he speaks really highly of him. I read his book when it came out a couple of years ago, and I think that relentlessness that he expects of the coaches and the staff around him, he can do because he's that relentless himself. He gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, his day starts, and there's no downtime. There's no switching off period for him. So if he's not switching off, then I'd say he expects everybody to be on that same level. And to be fair, I'd say you'd be pushed to find many people that are on that level that he's on. I think he, as Matt said, in the book, he comes across as a complete and utter workaholic that literally it almost goes ahead of his family and everything else. And if he's going to hold his job and what he does to that high esteem, and you're on his coaching ticket or in his backroom staff, and you don't put it into it what he is, I'd say he has very little time for you after that. And look, I'm similar to Matt. I don't condone any of the bullying or anything like that, but when it becomes an anonymous quote, you start to query whether it's just a staff member that's been slighted or a player that's not been selected. But I get great amusement from him. I do. I think the character that he plays and portrays to the media. And I've also heard him speak, in like a couple of World Rugby coaching stuff. And I think he's brilliant. His knowledge, his ability. I'd love to be shadowing him for a while to see how he ticks, because he is just on another level. And I think, and I kind of agree with you too, Joe, I kind of feel a little bit sorry for him after that. It kind of blew my mind, the article about it, because I wasn't really surprised having read his book, and I don't even know him like Matt does, but he just comes across as a ridiculously relentless, driven person that if you're not on his level, then he doesn't really want to know about it.
By a quirk of circumstance, he was on BT Sport then a couple of days after this article ahead of the November Internationals, doing an interview, and he's asked about the article, and he says, look, a lot of this isn't the truth, and when they write good stuff about me, I'm not as good as they say I am, and when they write the bad stuff, trust me, I'm not as bad as they say I am. I wouldn't have survived in the game this long if I was that terrible. He did concede at times, I'm not as nice as I'd like to be, and I suspect that was a euphemism when he said I'm not as nice as I'd like to be. Nice being a gentle way of putting it. But then just a clip to give you a sense of the mood he was in. Craig Doyle asked him if he was old school in his approach.
No, I wouldn't at all, and I don't even know what that means. Because old school, some of the best old school teaching or coaching is the best coaching, and then you've got to keep adding to what you do, and we try to do that and keep progressing where the learning environment is for the team.
I guess old school is more kind of maybe going face to face with people. The hairdryer treatment is how they call it. New school is more kind of touchy-feely, arm around the shoulder. That doesn't seem to be your thing. Do you think that's something you'll have to work on? And when you've got former coaches saying stuff like this, former players saying stuff like this?
Well, I'll tell you what, mate. I won't even give that question any credence, because I think that's not a great question.
Do you not? Okay. Well, I'm asking it on behalf of the people who've been asking questions to us, Eddie. Like, this isn't actually my opinion at all. This is the opinion of fans who've been writing. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Eddie, but it was a big article in a big national newspaper, and there has been a reaction to it.
There we go. So he shut that down fairly quickly, Matt. I mean, it does seem as well, behind the scenes, whatever about the pressure and maybe the communication at times, it does seem as if he works the team incredibly hard from a fitness point of view. And again, this is something that when they're going well in the World Cup is celebrated, and it's talked of in terms of, well, over the last couple of years he's made a point of getting this English team super fit, and look at the results. And then again, the other side of that coin is, well, they're flogged. And Alan Quinlan, it was interesting, Alan Quinlan was on OTB AM this morning, and he was telling an anecdote of that St. Patrick's Day when Ireland went over to Twickenham to try and win the Grand Slam. And Quinny was talking to a former English international at the games, and how do you think it's going to go? And the English player said to him, the former English player said, "Oh, no chance. I've heard during the week Eddie has flogged them, full contact, hell for leather. They're not going to be up to the pitch of this today." And obviously Ireland went on and won with their own very fine performance. But it was kind of an interesting insight to some of Jones's methods, which would raise an eyebrow.
Jake, I think it's a really interesting conversation. And like Eddie, I bristle at old school about coaching. Can we just throw that aside? It's what's effective. What is effective? It might be a new idea, that's great. It might be an old idea. It doesn't matter. It's what's effective, what works. So Jones, he's coming out. I'm not trying to say I'm anywhere near as good a coach as Jones was, but we came through the same school, run by Bob Dwyer, Bob Templeton, all these guys that won the World Cup in 91, 95, and then McQueen got them to 99. We're all coming through the system. The focus is the World Cup. The focus is the World Cup. You are going to lose some games. We'll sacrifice games. We'll blood people in the 4-year cycle, but we're going to the World Cup. Ireland and a lot of the countries in the north don't think like that. France are now thinking like that. Eddie thought like that. Okay, he lost the Grand... I'm not, again, saying what he did in the week leading up to the Grand Slam, St Patrick's Day, when Ireland won the Grand Slam was right. But he gets his cycle right for the World Cup. They were a week off. They peaked against New Zealand. They were down against South Africa and lost the final. But that's what he's about. And he'll win a Six Nations in the process, 1 or 2 as he's done in the last couple of 4-year cycles, the last 4-year cycle, but he'll lose some for the sake of getting there to get his timing right. Now, whether he's right or wrong, that's his philosophy. Can I say, like, to go in a bat for Eddie again, Todd Blackadder tells a story that a guy came up and bitched about Robbie Deans when he was coaching the Canterbury Crusaders. Robbie Deans was coach, and he came up to Todd Blackadder, who was the captain, and bitched to him behind Robbie's back. Todd Blackadder grabbed the guy by the lapel, marched him across the room, stood him in front of Robbie Deans and said, "Say it to his face, don't say it behind his back." I take absolutely zero credence in any comment that hasn't got a name on it. If you haven't got the guts as a professional athlete representing a country to put your name on the comment, shut up, because it's cowardly. So let's put all that in perspective when we talk about Eddie. If you're going to say something, put your name to it, and don't throw old school at me, because that is ignorant. It's ignorance of coaching. What is effective? So let's. I think it's a really good conversation to have out there in the general community, because I hear this all the time, and it just bugs me, because it's ignorance. It's not truth.
But he's also way ahead of his curve. He off the pitch, for me, his ability to be able to see where the game is going at that high performance level, like sleep expert and bringing in sports psychologists before anybody else did, bringing in contact coaches before that was popular. He was ahead of the curve. He was the one that set the precedence in that. And so, yeah, look, I think the whole English media, like, they'll jump on anything. But for me, obviously last year didn't go very well for them. So they're looking for almost like a scapegoat. When realistically, the players, there was a whole issue with the Saracens players playing championship and not being fit enough and not playing enough games. I think this year they're going to come at a different level from autumn internationals and in Six Nations, because the players that he has at his disposal, and he's actually properly selected and formed this time, which has probably been a little bit of a criticism I had of him beforehand. I think that it'd be interesting to have this conversation at the end of the Six Nations.
Well, Niamh, this is a very neat segue. So this will bring us on to Ireland and our playmaking situation. And this is something, Matt, you addressed in your piece at the weekend. And again, I mean, people are going to start to doubt that you don't love Eddie Jones, because the loving's about to continue here when I read a clip from your piece. So this is what you said of Jones, and just keep Ireland's playmaking situation at the back of your minds here, and we'll get on to that in a second. But I just thought this was interesting. You said, for instance, Eddie is one of the few coaches who's rejected the New Zealanders' attacking philosophy of spreading the forwards across the entire width of the field in small pods, which is something obviously we're very familiar with here. Every team that's defeated New Zealand in recent times has done so by playing a game that is not a Kiwi copy. No greater example than the 2019 Rugby World Cup semi-final. So you say England's forwards work between the two 15-metre lines, and Eddie has his wingers and fullbacks continuously changing sides to create and exploit overlaps. England's attacking strength is its uniqueness. And then like Niamh referenced, you mentioned the likes of Marcus Smith, along with Henry Slade, Owen Farrell, Max Malins. They will have multiple attacking playmakers. England's match against the Springboks at Twickenham this November will reveal if the English attack can reverse the outcome of the 19 World Cup and break down the physicality of the South African defence. So that's just some of your piece in the Irish Times. I thought it was very interesting, that Eddie has looked around and gone his own original way, and crucially, you say it's not a Kiwi copy.
And again, it comes back to my other point. People keep telling me, oh, that's a modern attacking system. And I thought, well, it's highly effective for New Zealand because they have great athletes to put into that system. So that system is designed for the athletes they have. And yet you have people at some clubs around the world where they've got a hooker that can't run fast or pass, and they put him on the wing. And you go, well, lads, that's not an effective system. Like, what's the system that maximises the talent of your team? So Eddie's looked around his team and says, this is a system that's going to maximise our talent. And that's a good system. That's a smart thing. But it's not copying New Zealand. You're never going to be better than New Zealand at being New Zealand. You've got to find something that's highly effective to maximise the talent of the players at your disposal. And that's what Eddie does. Now, if you spin that back a bit, the Australians and the New Zealanders, and to a degree the French, and I've got to give the French a lot of credit here, they're playing systems that are maximising what they've got. And now the Australians are the least talented of those three. But they beat South Africa, they beat the world champions 2 times in a row. Now, it's close, I give you that. But they did it with less talent than they have. So I think the challenge for Ireland is to look at Eddie and say, okay, he's rejected the New Zealand system, which I agree with, but he's designed a system, he and his coaching staff and players have got together and designed a system to maximise what they've got. Ireland have got to do the same. But you can't do that with just one playmaker against rushing defence, which, again, the Australians and the New Zealanders have shown. You've got to have a few playmakers. What the Australians did, they looked where Faf de Klerk was, and to a lesser degree, Andre Pollard in the line, in the defensive line, and they got a group of attackers and went at them, especially Faf de Klerk, because he's a highly effective low tackler. He's not a big man, he's only a short fella, so he can't block the ball. So they would get into his lane and look to the offload, and they scored, made a lot of breaks, they scored one very good try by doing that. Great thinking, great concepts. Ireland have to do the same. With just Johnny Sexton in the team as a playmaker, it doesn't work because everyone knows if you can shut down Johnny to a degree, he's a great player, you're not going to completely shut him down. If you can limit him, you'll limit Ireland. So that's the great challenge for the Irish attack leading up to the World Cup, really. Not just the next couple of weeks of the Six Nations, but the next 2 years.
Yeah. So, Niamh, let's dive into the Irish angle then in particular, because the will Johnny Sexton make the World Cup in 2023 discussion has maybe dominated for the last while and has probably overshadowed really the more important one, which is if you stop Johnny, you stop Ireland. You know, that label against Ireland. So talk to us about Ireland when it comes to a second playmaker, a second creative force out there, whatever way you want to term it. So first question I'd have for you, say it's Hugo Keenan, say it's Ringrose and Aki for the next couple of weeks. Is there not enough creativity there? Like what's different to them versus a Joey Carberry or even a Kieran Frawley type?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure there is. To be fair, though, I think coming into last year's Six Nations, towards the end of it, when Ireland had to put that run of performance together where they played really well, Bundy and Robbie Henshaw definitely had a little bit of a playmaking role. They had a role where they could be able to hit those passes out the back. I don't think it's just down to one person. I think it's about a whole unit being able to work off the ball and being able to identify space. I think at this level, you know, the likes of Bundy, Robbie, Gary Ringrose, Kieran Frawley, they're all really good players. But if you've got nobody on the outside channels dictating where the space is, then, you know, it's very difficult to see it when you're in the cold face of it. I think that for me, at times, the communication around that was probably something that was really lacking. I also think that you need one forward that's going to be a pivot, that's going to be that little playmaker role, a kind of a Retallick type player that will offer you that, you know, ability to be able to throw the pass, you know, in the front or out the back while, you know, you're in those outside channels, if that makes any sense. And I'm not sure that Ireland have exploited that. We've seen the likes of Tyke Furlong being able to literally tie in so many defenders because he's so big and powerful, and then be able to put these small little passes off either side of him. It's for Ireland to maximise their potential, and if it's a case that they're going to not play Joey Carberry at 15, well, they're the kind of roles that has to happen, because like Matt was alluding to earlier on, when you have a number of players that are comfortable as first receiver, then it makes it very easy to be able to see space and to be able to get it there. I think when you have players that aren't used to slotting into those positions week in, week out with their clubs, it's a big ask to ask them to do it in international rugby. So I think you've got to find a way or a system, as Matt was talking about earlier on, that suits you the best. I think towards the end of last year's Six Nations, they found it. And, you know, I would love to see Frawley have a practice these few weeks. I think he has something that, you know, that Ireland maybe have been missing in around that centre spot. And I think that his ability to be able to bring players in around him, but it's not only that, it's about the players being able to run off him and those angles that they can run. And know that if they run into the space, they're going to get the ball because the ball carrier has been able to see it, if that makes any sense.
No, total sense. So, Matt, say, for instance, the likes of Bundy, Ringrose, Hugo Keenan, do you see enough creativity there, enough comfort at first receiver there?
I certainly think Hugo's time being a quality sevens player, he can. And I think he's been absolutely excellent as a fullback. He's been super safe, never makes a mistake. I think he really reminds me of Gervin Dempsey in that he's very safe, technically very correct. He's just not believing in himself enough. I think he's got so much more in him as a player. And I know he can run with the ball, but I think he could definitely play like New Zealand when they play Richie Mo'unga at 10, they'll play Beauden Barrett at fullback. And I think he can play like Barrett. I think he's got that passing game. I'd love to see Frawley get time at 12. As the Kiwis say, a second 5. It's like a second out half, a second 5'8", as we call them in the South. And he's probably more solid in that. You have Joey on the bench with Zebo. There's two creative players on the bench. And Gary Ringrose, if he's given time, and what do I mean by that? If he's got quick hands inside him to give him a few steps with a ball in hand, Gary is a quality player and can also shift the ball. But I have not liked... I'm feeling very bad because I'm a great admirer of Bundy. I'm a fan. I love the way he plays. But he's a power athlete for my books. And I really enjoy and I really respect him. I'm not talking him down in any way. But it's about getting combinations. It's like your back row. You can't pick 3 open sides in your back row. You've got to have that combination. And your 10, 12, 13, you know, it's a mixture together. It's what are the best mixtures that make them work the best. And I'm just not sure that Bundy, when you use him, you've got to use him for a specific role and in a specific way. And I'm just not sure that Ireland's got that right. I'm agreeing with Niamh said there. In the end of the last year's Six Nations, Ireland played great rugby. Against England, they were fantastic. And at home, they've been really hard. So they're not far away.
Yeah.
But we're talking about, let's come back again. How are you going to win a quarterfinal? So to win a quarterfinal, you've got to beat one of the top 4. Playing the way they're going, you know, are they going to beat one of those top 4? Right now, you've got to say it's highly, you know, it's percentages against them. So they've got to make progress in the next 2 years, and that's one way they've got to do it.
Before we talk New Zealand, Wales, Niamh, anything else you're looking out for against Japan, who obviously are going to bring their own unique, wonderful brand, and everybody's kind of excited for this game. The game in the summer was brilliant, and arguably Japan played the better rugby, even though they lost. So you're assuming same again from them?
Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately, couldn't watch their game against Australia because we didn't have the feed through Northern Hemisphere. But, you know, reading all the match reports, it's very similar to the Ireland game in the summer. They played a huge amount of rugby, just lacked that little bit of cohesion because of lack of game time together. So they had that game under their belt now and they're coming. So, look, I'm really excited. I think you'd love to see Ireland have a bit more, probably, bravery to go down the wider channels, to be able to have that ability to be able to have that 2-tier attack. I think that's going to be something. And what you're really looking for is an evolution from the last time they played. So the last time they played Six Nations, the summer tests were a bit different because obviously the lines were away and a lot of senior players were rested. But you'd just like to see an evolution coming from the Six Nations into this calendar. But look, I'm really excited for it. I think I think Irish rugby's in a really good place in terms of the URC stuff. I think majority of the time, I know given about different performances at different times, but I think for the most part, the 4 or 5 games that have the players have had leading into this, will really center them.
Yeah. And Matt, anything you're looking out for beyond what we've discussed regarding Ireland?
Look, I think over this series in the Six Nations, consistency, Joe, I think is the big thing. Consistency and that of quality performances keep moving up. The last, really 2 years, there've been some great performances, like against England, some really dog performances as well. They've got to get that consistency of high quality performance. You're not going to win every game, and no one expects that. But like when they're playing New Zealand, everyone expects New Zealand to win this game. I certainly do. But if Ireland come out and put in a really high quality performance and maintain their standards of performance on the way through, not just 3 November games, but a long, long series of matches, that's what we're really after.
We're talking here with Matt Williams and Niamh Briggs. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, sponsor of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. We might finish talking Wales 16, New Zealand 54. This was on Amazon Prime, certainly in this part of the world. I think that 1 month free trial with Amazon, I'd say they hooked in a whole bunch of people this month. So Wayne Pivac against Ian Foster. 7 tries for New Zealand, 2 for Beauden Barrett on his 100th cap. Just the 11th All Black to reach 100 caps, by the way. So New Zealand return to the top of the world rankings. South Africa are second. Niamh, are New Zealand the best team in the world?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
I just thought their ability, ball in hand, from their props to their back 3 players, and their ability, and definitely wasn't, things weren't perfect the other day, but it's their ability to ratchet up a couple of notches every time they need to is just at another level. And it's their running angles, their ability. Like, for me, the whole Beauden Barrett Richie Mo'unga thing is obviously a really big kind of talking point. Like, who's the better 10? They're both really different players. But the find for me is David Havili moving into 12. He just offers so much in terms of, he's not a huge, big flash player, but his ability to be able to carry the ball to the line, throw these offloads post-contact, but also be able to play that second playmaker. So ultimately, New Zealand could end up with a Richie Mo'unga, David Havili and Beauden Barrett on the pitch at the same time.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, proud supporters of Movember. Gentlemen, let's